The Serene Awakening. Part 1. The Quiet Life of a Retired Samurai. The first light of dawn has not yet touched the horizon when Takeshi's eyes open. There is no jarring alarm, no sudden movement, just a natural transition from sleep to wakefulness that comes with decades of disciplined living. At 65, his body still maintains the alertness of a warrior, though now it serves a different master: peace. His modest wooden house sits nestled among ancient cedar trees, their towering presence a testament to endurance and quiet strength. The structure itself speaks of simplicity. Unpainted timber weathered to a soft gray, paper screens that filter the earliest hints of light, and tatami mats that have absorbed the footsteps of contemplation for years. This is not the grand estate of a daimyo, but the chosen refuge of a man who has learned that true wealth lies not in possessions, but in the richness of a tranquil heart. Takeshi rises from his futon with the same measured grace that once guided his sword arm. His movements are deliberate, unhurried, each gesture a small meditation in itself. The calluses on his palms, once formed by the grip of katana, now tell stories of different battles. The patient cultivation of vegetables, the careful tending of stone arrangements, the daily ritual of maintaining harmony between man and nature. The floorboard beneath his feet emit the softest whisper as he moves through his home. These sound to become his morning prayer. The gentle creaks that speak of what's settled into perfect stability, the whisper of his clothing against itself, the quiet rhythm of his breathing. In his warrior days, such sounds might have meant the difference between life and death. Now, they are simply the music of existence, appreciated for their own sake. Through the translucent shoji screens, the world outside remains wrapped in the soft darkness that precedes dawn. But Takeshi knows his darkness intimately, not as something to be feared or hurried through, but as a companion in contemplation. It is in these moments before light that the mind settles most naturally into stillness, when the boundary between self and universe grows thin as morning mist. His first destination is the small alcove where he keeps his tea implements. The wooden shelf holds each item with the reverence of shrine. The iron kettle blackened by countless uses, the bamboo whisk worn smooth by his fingers, the ceramic bowls that fit perfectly in his weathered palms. These are not mere utensils, but partners in a daily ritual that transforms the simple act of preparing tea into a gateway to mindfulness. The well outside his home sits beneath a canopy of maple branches. As Takeshi draws water in the pre-dawn darkness, he pauses to listen to the sound it makes falling into his wooden bucket, a pure, clear note that seems to awaken something essential in the morning air. The water itself is a gift, drawn from deep earth, filtered through stone and root, carry within it the essence of mountains and sky. Back inside, he places the iron kettle over a small charcoal brazier. The ritual of lighting the charcoal becomes its own meditation. Each piece must be arranged just so, each breath of air carefully provided to nurture flame without forcing it. As the first wisps of smoke rise, Takeshi reflects on the ancient Japanese understanding of fire as a living entity, not merely a tool, but teacher of transformation and purification. While the water begins its slow journey toward readiness, Takeshi slides open the doors that lead to his garden. The space beyond is small, perhaps no larger than a typical room, but it contains entire worlds. A single stone lantern stands sentinel among carefully pruned shrubs. A narrow path of stepping stones winds between patches of moss so green they seem to glow with their own inner light. In one corner, bamboo fountain fills and empties with the patient rhythm of natural time, each hollow talk marking moments not as something to be counted, but as gifts to be received. The garden is where Takeshi's warrior training and his spiritual practice merge most completely. Every plan has been placed with the strategic thinking of a military campaign, yet the overall effect is one of effortless natural beauty. The small pine tree near the center took 3 years to train into its current graceful curve, a lesson in patience that his younger, more impetuous self could never have learned. The arrangement of stones along the path follows principles both aesthetic and practical, creating a walking meditation that guides the foot while freeing the mind. As he tends to his morning inspection of the garden, Takeshi's movements embody the concept of Ichigo Ichi, one time, one meeting. Each morning's encounter with his plants is unique, never to be repeated exactly. The moss may have grown imperceptibly, A leaf may have fallen in the night, creating a new composition of color and form. These tiny changes, invisible to a hurried glance, become profound teachings for eyes trained to see. The sound of the kettle beginning to whisper draws him back inside. This first stage of water heating has its own name in the tea ceremony. Fish eyes, for the small bubbles that rise like the eyes of fish looking up through clear water. Takeshi settles into Sai's position before his tea implements, spine straight but relaxed, breathing deep and even. The morning meditation is beginning in earnest now. From a simple wooden box, he retrieves a small portion of matcha powder, green tea ground to the fineness of silk, each particle carrying within it the concentrated essence of shade-grown leaves. The powder falls into his tea bowl like green snow, creating tiny mountains and valleys in a ceramic landscape. This moment, too, is part of the meditation, observing how the powder settles, appreciating the subtle variations in color and texture, understanding that even in the smallest detail, the entire universe reveals itself to patient observation. The water in the kettle has reached the proper temperature. Not boiling, which would scorch the delicate tea, but just short of it, when the bubbles rise like strings of pearls. Takeshi lifts the kettle with both hands, a gesture of respect for the water and gratitude for its service. The first drops fall into the bowl with a sound like rain on leaves, and steam rises carrying the grassy, almost oceanic scent of high-quality matcha. With his bamboo whisk, he begins a careful process of creating koi-cha, thick tea. The whisking is not vigorous but controlled, each movement designed to incorporate air and water and powder into perfect unity. His wrist moves and patterns learned through decades of practice, but his mind remains present to each sensation. The resistance of the liquid, the gradual transformation of texture, the way the color deepens from bright green to the rich jade of deep forest shade. As he works, the legend of Amaterasu's sacred mirror comes to mind, a story his grandmother told him in childhood, now given new meaning through years of contemplation. The mirror, hidden in a cave when the sun goddess retreated from the world's cruelties, reflected not just light, but truth itself. When the other deities finally coaxed Amaterasu to emerge, the mirror showed her that her own radiance was what the world most needed. In the tea bowl before him, Takeshi sees his own version of that sacred mirror. The dark green surface of the tea reflects the morning light filtering through his windows, but more than that, it reflects the careful attention he has brought to this moment. Like Amaterasu's mirror, it shows truth. That peace is not the absence of struggle, but the presence of mindful engagement with whatever life presents. The first sip of tea is always taken in silence. The liquid is warm but not hot, creamy but not heavy, with a slight bitterness that speaks of the tea plant's natural defenses transformed through cultivation and ceremony into nourishment. Takeshi holds the tea in his mouth for a moment before swallowing, allowing every taste bud to participate in this communion with the earth that provided the tea, the rain that watered it, the sun that fed it, and the hands that prepared it. Outside, the sky is beginning to lighten from black to deep blue. The first birds of morning, a thrush perhaps, or one of the wrens that nest in his eaves, offers a tentative note to the growing day. Takeshi pauses in his tea, drinking to listen, appreciating how the bird's song seems to harmonize with the gentle bubbling of his bamboo fountain and the almost inaudible whisper of his own breathing. This is how enlightenment comes. He has learned, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a gradual recognition that everything necessary for peace already exists in this moment. The tea, the garden, the approaching dawn, the memory of ancient stories, the calluses on his hands. All of it forms a perfect mandala of existence that requires nothing more than a complete presence to be appreciated. As he finishes his tea, Takeshi places the empty bowl on its proper place on the low table. The morning ritual is complete, but the day's meditation has only begun. Soon he will venture into his garden for the careful work of tending, then perhaps a walk through the bamboo grove that borders his property. Each activity will carry forward the mindfulness established in these quiet moments before dawn, creating an unbroken chain of awareness that transforms ordinary life into spiritual practice. The sun's first rays are beginning to filter through the trees now, painting everything in soft gold. Takeshi sits for a moment longer, hands resting gently on his knees, breathing in the morning air that carries scent of earth and growing things. In the distance, he can hear the sound of a temple bell marking the hour. not as a demand for haste, but as a gentle reminder that time itself is a gift to be received with gratitude. This is a life he has chosen, not retreat from the world, but deeper engagement with it through the lens of perfect attention. Each morning begins this way, with tea and silence and the recognition that true victory lies not in conquering others, but in achieving harmony with the endless, perfect mystery of existence itself. The Tea Ritual. Part 2. The Quiet Life of a Retired Samurai. The morning has settled into its own rhythm now, the initial awakening giving way to something deeper and more structured. Takeshi moves with the unhurried precision of someone who has discovered that true mastery lies not in speed, but in the perfect execution of each small action. Today, like every day for the past 7 years since laying down his sword, he will perform Shinryu, the way of tea, not as performance or ceremony, but as a living meditation that bridges the sacred and the mundane. His tea room, or chishitsu, occupies the eastern corner of his modest home. The space is deliberately small, no more than 4.5 tatami mats, following the ancient principle that intimacy breeds contemplation. The walls are unadorned save for a single scroll hanging in the Tokonoma alcove, its calligraphy reading, Wa Keisei Jaku, harmony, respect, purity, tranquility. These 4 principles, the foundation of the tea ceremony, have become the cornerstones of his retired life. Morning light filters through the paper screens with the gentleness of a lover's touch, casting everything in soft, diffused illumination that seems to emanate from within rather than fall from without. The quality of this light changes throughout the seasons, harsh and bright in summer, golden and slanted in autumn, pale and precious in winter, fresh and green tinge in spring. Today, in the early days of autumn, it carries the weight of changing leaves and the promise of contemplative months ahead. Takeshi begins by purifying the space, not because it is dirty, his daily cleaning ensures that, but because the act of purification is itself a form of meditation. With a soft cloth, he wipes down surfaces that are already spotless, each stroke a prayer of gratitude for the tools that serve him, for the space that shelters his sacred practice, for the hands that still move with grace despite their accumulation of years. The implements for today's ceremony are arranged on a low wooden table, with the precision of a master strategist positioning pieces for battle. But this is a different kind of warfare, a gentle combat against haste, against mindlessness, against the tendency of the human heart to rush through life without tasting its essential sweetness. The iron kettle, blackened by countless fires, sits beside a bamboo ladle worn smooth by decades of use. The tea bowl, its ceramic surface bearing the subtle imperfections that mark true beauty, waits empty and patient. From a paulownia with box lined with silk, Takeshi removes a small container of tea leaves. These are not the powdered matcha of his morning meditation, but carefully selected leaves for preparation of suncha, whole leaves that will unfurl in hot water like tiny prayers releasing their essence. The leaves are a deep forest green, each one a small masterpiece of natural architecture, bearing the patterns of veins and the subtle variations that speak of their individual journey from bud to harvest. He lifts the container to his face and inhales deeply. The aroma is complex, grassy and sweet, with undertones of the mountain soil where these particular leaves grew. But beyond the physical scent lies something more. The memory of rain on tea bushes, of morning mist in mountain valleys, of farmers' hands selecting each leaf at the perfect moment of ripeness. In this small container rests an entire world of careful cultivation and patient waiting. The water in his kettle has been heating slowly over a charcoal brazier, and now it approaches the perfect temperature for suncha. Not the rolling boil that would suit coarser teas, but the gentle heat that will coax rather than force the leaves to release their treasures. Takeshi listens to the water with the same attention he once paid to the sounds of approaching enemies. First comes a phase of crab eyes, small bubbles forming at the bottom of the kettle. Then fish eyes, as the bubbles grow larger and begin to rise. Finally, the string of pearls stage, when streams of bubbles ascend like offerings to heaven. As he waits, Takeshi allows his mind to drift to one of the oldest stories about tea, a legend that has comforted him through many solitary mornings. More than 4,000 years ago, so the story goes, there lived an emperor named Shun Nung, whose wisdom was matched only by his curiosity about the natural world. Shun Nung was known for his caution. He boiled all water before drinking it, understanding even in those ancient times that purity was a foundation of health. One autumn day, as the emperor rested beneath a wild tea tree, several leaves fell into his pot of boiling water. Rather than discarding the contaminated liquid, Shen Nung noticed how the water had taken on a beautiful amber color and released a delicate fragrance. When he tasted this accidental brew, he discovered not only a pleasant flavor but a sense of heightened awareness and inner calm. The emperor had stumbled upon tea, and with it, a pathway to both physical and spiritual well-being. Takeshi smiles softly as he contemplates this ancient tale. Like so many of the world's greatest discoveries, tea came not through force or deliberate seeking, but through patience, openness, and the willingness to receive unexpected gifts. The emperor's careful attention to what might have been dismissed as an accident became the foundation for centuries of contemplative practice. The water has reached its perfect temperature now, and Takeshi begins a careful process of awakening the tea leaves. First, he warms a ceramic teapot with a small amount of hot water, swirling it gently before discarding it. This prepares the vessel to receive the tea, creating an environment where the leaves can unfold without shock. Every gesture is deliberate, economical, beautiful in its purposefulness. He measures the tea leaves with a bamboo scoop, each portion calculated not by weight, but by intuition developed through years of practice. Too few leaves, and the tea will be weak, unable to carry the full message of its terroir. Too many, and the resulting brew will be bitter, overwhelming rather than enlightening. The balance point exists in that narrow space where knowledge meets instinct, where technique serves not itself but the greater harmony of the moment. The hot water meets the leaves with a soft whisper, and immediately the transformation begins. The dry, compact leaves begin to uncurl, releasing their first tentative notes of fragrance into the warming air. Takeshi watches this awakening with the same reverence he once reserved for sunrise over distant battlefields. Each leaf unfolds according to its own nature, some quickly, others with stately deliberation, all contributing to the complex symphony of flavor that will soon emerge. As the tea steeps, Takeshi sits in perfect stillness, his breathing synchronized with the subtle sound around him. The gentle bubble of the remaining water in the kettle, the almost inaudible expansion of warming ceramic, the whisper of autumn wind through the cedars outside his window. Time moves differently in these moments, expanding to accommodate the full depth of experience that comes with complete presence. He speaks now, his voice barely above a whisper, sharing the wisdom that has accumulated like sediment in the still pools of his contemplation. In my warrior days, he begins, I believe that strength came from action, from the swift stroke of the sword, from the ability to move faster than one's enemy. But tea has taught me a different kind of strength, the power that comes from perfect stillness, from allowing each moment to unfold in its own time. His weathered hands gesture toward the steeping tea, and in that simple movement lies decades of martial training transformed into something gentler but no less precise. See how the leaves open? They cannot be hurried. Force them with water too hot, and they release only bitterness. Rush them with too little time, and they share only surface flavors. But give them patience, give them respect, and they offer their deepest essence freely. The first pour is crucial. Takeshi lifts the teapot with both hands, a gesture of respect for the vessel and its contents. The tea emerges in a golden stream, filling the cup with liquid that seems to capture and concentrate the morning light. The color is perfect, neither too pale nor too dark, with a clarity that speaks of pure water meeting perfect leaves at exactly the right temperature. He inhales the steam rising from the cup, and in that vapor carries the distilled essence of everything that brought this moment into being. The soil that nurtured the tea bush, the rain that fed it, the sun that gave it energy, the hands that harvested it, the fire that heated the water, and the centuries of masters who refined this practice into its current perfection. In this single breath, past and present merge into an eternal now. Emperor Shen Nung discovered something profound in that first accidental cup. Takeshi continues, his voice carrying the cadence of a man who has spent long hours in solitary reflection. He found that true discovery comes not from seeking, but from being present to what life offers us. The tea leaves fell into his water not because he willed it, but because he had created the conditions, the attention, the patience, the willingness to receive, that allowed magic to occur. The first sip is taken in complete silence. The tea flows over his tongue like liquid meditation, its flavor complex and layered. There's the initial grass-sweet taste, followed by subtle mineral notes that speak of mountain springs and volcanic soil. A hint of astringency provides structure, while an underlying sweetness ties all the elements together in perfect harmony. But beyond taste lies something more elusive, a sense of connection to the earth that produced this tea, to the tradition that preserved its preparation, to the countless souls who have found solace in this simple ritual. Takeshi sets down the cup with the same reverence with which he once sheathed his sword after battle. In the way of the warrior, he reflects, we learn that every movement must have intention. Every action must serve a purpose larger than the self. Tea ceremony teaches the same lesson, but through gentleness rather than force. Each gesture in Shinoyu is a small prayer, each pause a moment of gratitude. He pours a second cup, noting how the tea has deepened in flavor as the leaves continue to release their essence. This is another lesson tea offers, that the first experience, however beautiful, is only the beginning. Depth comes through patience, through allowing processes to unfold naturally, through trusting that time and attention will reveal treasures that haste can never discover. The emperor's discovery changed not just his own life, but the course of human culture. Takeshi continues, his eyes focus on steam rising from his cup as if reading messages written in vapor. From that single moment of accidental grace came tea houses and temples, poetry and paintings, millions of quiet moments when people pause in their busy lives to simply be present with a cup of tea. One man's willingness to taste something unexpected created a tradition that has brought peace to countless hearts. The morning light has grown stronger now, transforming the tea room into a luminous sanctuary. Dust motes dance in the slanted rays, each one a tiny world spinning in its own perfect orbit. Outside, Takeshi can hear the first stirrings of the day. Birds calling to each other across the valley, the distant sound of a temple bell marking the hour, the whisper of wind through bamboo groves. As he prepares a third and final infusion, Takeshi reflects on the parallels between his two lives. As a samurai, he had served his lord with absolute dedication, finding meaning in duty and honor in the warrior's path. Now, in retirement, he serves a different master, the present moment itself, with its infinite capacity for beauty and meaning when approached with the proper attention. The final cup of tea is always the most subtle, requiring the deepest attention to appreciate. The leaves have given almost all they have to give, but in that apparent exhaustion lies a different kind of gift, the quiet satisfaction of having offered one's essence completely, holding nothing back. Takeshi drinks this last cup slowly, savoring not just the delicate flavor but the completion it represents, the full circle of giving and receiving that makes the ceremony a perfect metaphor for life itself. When the tea is finished, he sits for several more minutes in contemplative silence, allowing the experience to settle into his bones like sediment in a still pond. The empty cup before him is not a symbol of absence but fulfillment. Something that was full, was appreciated, was consumed with mindfulness, and now waits empty and ready for whatever may come next. This is a gift of Shinoyu, the lesson that Emperor Shin-Nun discovered in his accidental first taste of tea, that the sacred exists not in some distant realm, but in the careful attention we bring to the simplest acts of daily life. In the space between one breath and the next, between the pouring of water and the first sip of tea, between the end of one cup and the beginning of another, lies everything we need to know about contentment, about presence, about the gentle art of being fully alive. Walk through the bamboo forest. Part 3. The quiet life of a retired samurai. The tea ceremony has ended, but its spirit flows seamlessly into the next phase of Takeshi's morning practice. He rises from the tatami with the fluid grace that has never quite left his movements, even after years of peace. The walking meditation that awaits him is not separate from what came before. It is a natural continuation of the same mindfulness, expressed now through movement rather than stillness. Beyond his garden gate lies a path that has been worn smooth by decades of his footsteps, leading into a grove of bamboo that stands like a natural cathedral at the edge of his property. This bamboo forest has become his most trusted teacher, its lessons changing with each season, each weather pattern, each subtle shift in the quality of light that filters through its towering canopy. As Takeshi steps onto the earthen path, he pauses to acknowledge the transition from his cultivated garden to this wilder space. The bamboo grove is not entirely wild. It shows signs of careful tending, selective cutting, and the kind of respectful management that allows natural systems to flourish while preventing them from becoming chaotic. But compared to precise arrangement as rock garden, this space breathes with a different kind of order, one that follows the organic patterns of growth and decay, of reaching toward light and sending roots deep into rich earth. The first bamboo culms rise around him like pillars in a temple designed by nature herself. These are mature specimens, some reaching heights of 30 feet or more. Their base is thick as a strong man's torso. The bark is smooth and segmented, painted in shades that range from pale green to deep amber, depending on age and exposure to sun and weather. Each joint, each node where the bamboo's growth paused before reaching upward again, tells a story of patient development, of strength built not through haste, but through the steady accumulation of time and nourishment. Takashi begins to walk, his steps deliberately slow and measured. This is Kinhin, walking meditation, but adapted to his own understanding developed through years of solitary practice. Each footfall is placed with conscious intention, feeling the give of earth beneath his sandals, the slight compression of fallen leaves, the varied textures of root and stone that create the forest floor's complex topography. The sound begins almost immediately, a soft rustling that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, as if the forest itself is breathing. Wind moves through the bamboo with a voice unlike any other sound in nature. It is not the broad whoosh of wind through deciduous trees, nor the sharp whistle of air through pine needles. Instead, it creates a symphony of hollow tones, as if each bamboo culm has become a vertical flute, producing its own note as air passes across its opening at the top and resonates within its hollow chamber. As the breeze strengthens, the individual voices join in harmonies that shift and change with the wind's direction and intensity. Some bamboos sway more than others, the younger, more flexible culms bending in graceful arcs while their older neighbors remain straighter, their movements more restrained but no less musical. The sound rises and falls like breathing, creating natural rhythms that seem to synchronize with Takashi's own heartbeat. He stops beneath a particularly magnificent specimen, one that has grown straight and true for what must be 15 years or more. Its trunk is so thick that his arms would not quite encircle it, its surface so smooth it seems polished by decades of wind and rain. Takashi places his palm against the bamboo's cool surface and feels the solidity beneath. Not the dead weight of timber, but something that still carries a memory of growth, of sap rising, of life responding to seasons and storms. "Bend, but do not break," he whispers to himself, remembering an old proverb that has taken on new meaning in his retirement. As a young samurai, he had interpreted this as a tactical lesson. The importance of strategic retreat, of yielding when necessary, preserves strength for more favorable moments. But the bamboo teaches a deeper truth. Its flexibility is not weakness disguised as strength, but strength itself, expressed through the wisdom of accommodation. He watches as a gust of wind moves through the grove, observing how each bamboo responds according to its nature. The youngest culms bend so far they nearly touch the ground, their tips describing great arcs in the air. Yet they return a vertical with a graceful spring, suffering no damage from their extreme flexibility. The middle-aged bamboo sway less dramatically, but with a kind of measured rhythm, like dancers who have learned to move with both power and restraint. The oldest specimens barely move their trunks at all, but their crowns whisper and nod, showing that even the most established can respond to change without compromising their fundamental integrity. This is a lesson that has sustained Takashi through the most difficult period of his life, the transition from warrior to peaceful hermit. There had been years when he bent so far under the weight of change that he feared he might break entirely. The loss of purpose that came with laying down his sword, the struggle to find meaning in a life no longer defined by duty and conflict, the long nights when muscle memories still reached for weapons that were no longer there. But like the bamboo, he had learned to bend without breaking. The flexibility that saved him was not physical but spiritual. The willingness to let old identities fall away like shed bark, to allow new growth to emerge from what seemed like emptiness, to trust in the wisdom of seasons that bring both dormancy and renewal. Continuing deeper into the grove, Takashi notices how the light changes. The bamboo canopy filters sunlight into a green-tinted glow that seems to emanate from within the leaves themselves. This underwater quality of illumination creates a sense of being in a sacred space, separated from the ordinary world by walls of living green. The temperature here is cooler, the air more humid, carrying the rich scent of earth and growing things. Occasionally, a single leaf spirals down from the canopy, catching his attention with its gentle descent. Bamboo is evergreen, but individual leaves die and fall throughout the year, making way for new growth. Takeshi pauses to watch one such leaf as it rides invisible currents of air, turning and gliding before finally coming to rest on the forest floor. Even in death, it serves, beginning its transformation into the rich humus that will nourish the roots of the living bamboo above. The path curves now, following the natural contours of the hillside. Here, Takeshi encounters younger bamboo, the new shoots that emerge after last spring's cutting. These culms are bright green, their bark still tender, their joints more closely spaced. They bend more readily in the wind, but also grow more quickly, some having added several feet to their height just since the summer rains began. It is here, among these younger bamboo, that Takeshi's mind turns to one of Japan's oldest and most beloved tales, the story of Teitori no Kina, the bamboo cutter, and mysterious Princess Kagaya, who emerged from a glowing bamboo comb to bring wonder and sorrow to the mortal world. As the legend tells it, there was once an old bamboo cutter who made his living harvesting bamboo from groves much like this one. He was a simple man, honest and hardworking, content with his modest life, until the day he noticed an unusual bamboo comb that glowed with inner light. When he cut it open, he discovered inside a tiny, perfect girl no larger than his thumb, radiant with beauty that seemed to come from another world entirely. The bamboo cutter and his wife raised a child as their own, naming her Naote no Kagaihime, Princess Kagaya of the supple bamboo. As she grew, her beauty became legendary, attracting suitors from across the realm, including the emperor himself. But Kagaihime carried within her the knowledge that she was not of this world, that her time among mortals was temporary, a brief and precious interlude before she would return to her home in the Palace of the Moon. Takeshi has always been drawn to this story, not for its romantic elements or its supernatural wonders, but for what it reveals about the nature of beauty and impermanence. Princess Kagaya's greatest gift to those who knew her was not her otherworldly loveliness, but her presence, the way she illuminated ordinary moments with extraordinary awareness, finding joy in simple pleasures that others might overlook. Walking among the bamboo now, Takeshi sees a grove through Kagaya's eyes, each comb potential source of wonder, each play of light and shadow a small miracle worthy of contemplation. The princess understood something that her suitors, with their elaborate gifts and grand gestures, could not grasp. That true beauty lies not in possession but in appreciation, not in permanence but in the poignancy of things that pass. A small clearing opens ahead, where a single mass of bamboo has fallen, creating a natural bench. Takeshi settles here for a longer pause, his back against the horizontal trunk, his gaze directed upward through the canopy to the patches of sky visible between the leaves. From this vantage point, the forest reveals new patterns, the way certain combs lean toward each other as if in conversation, the geometric precision of the joints that divide each bamboo into segments, the delicate tracery of smaller branches and leaves that create ever-changing patterns against the blue sky. The wind picks up again and the forest responds with hollow symphony. But now, Takeshi notices subtler sounds within the larger music. The creak of bamboo rubbing against bamboo, the whisper of leaves brushing together, the occasional sharp crack when particularly dry comb flexes beyond its limit. Even this breaking sound is not harsh but musical, adding percussion to the wind's melody. She understood, he murmurs, thinking of Princess Kagaya, that the most precious moments are often the quietest ones, not the grand pronouncements of love or the elaborate displays of wealth, but the simple act of sitting with someone and watching light move through leaves. In the story, Kagaya's eventual return to the moon is portrayed as tragedy, the inevitable loss that comes with loving something not of this world. But Takeshi has come to see it differently. The princess's departure was not a cruel ending, but the natural completion of a gift. She had shown the bamboo cutter and his wife, and all who knew her, how to see their world with new eyes. That vision remained even after she was gone, transforming their perception of everything around them. The bamboo grove teaches the same lesson. Each day brings subtle changes, new growth, fallen leaves, shifts in light and shadow, but the essential beauty remains constant, waiting to be rediscovered by anyone willing to approach it with fresh attention. The grove will outlast Takeshi, as it outlasted the bamboo cutter in the ancient tale. But the peace it offers is renewable, available to each generation that learns to walk slowly through its quiet spaces. Rising from his resting place, Takashi continues his circuit through the grove. The path curves back toward his home now, but he takes his time, stopping to observe particular bamboo that have caught his attention, one split by lightning but still growing, another that has grown in a perfect spiral, reaching for a gap in the canopy where more light penetrates. Near the edge of the grove, where cultivated space begins to merge with wild growth, he encounters a young bamboo shoot that has just emerged from the earth. It is barely waist-high, its bark still soft and pale, its leaves unfurling with the tender vulnerability of new life. In a few years, if left undisturbed, this comb will tower above his head, adding its voice to the forest's perpetual song. Takashi kneels beside the young bamboo and places his hand gently on its surface. The bark is warm from the morning sun, slightly fuzzy with the fine hairs that protect new growth. He can almost feel the life force moving within, the upward surge of sap, the cellular divisions that add length and girth, the patient work of transformation that turns earth and water and sunlight into living architecture. Grow straight, he whispers, a blessing and a wish. Grow strong. Learn to bend with the wind, but never forget your roots. As he speaks, a memory surfaces, his grandfather teaching him to use a bamboo practice sword, explaining how bamboo's combination of strength and flexibility made it the perfect material for training warriors. Steel breaks when stressed beyond its limit, the old man had said, but bamboo teaches you to find strength in yielding, power in accommodation. Learn this lesson well, and you will never truly be defeated. Now, decades later, Takashi understands that his grandfather was teaching him about more than swordsmanship. The way of bamboo is applicable to all of life, the art of remaining rooted while staying flexible, of growing straight while learning to bend, of finding strength not through rigidity, but through the wisdom of appropriate response. The walk back to his house takes him along the edge of the grove, where the bamboo gradually gives way to other trees, cedar and pine, maple and oak. But even as he leaves the forest behind, its lessons travel with him. The sound of wind through bamboo continues to echo in his memory, a reminder that flexibility and strength are not opposites but partners, each making the other possible. At his garden gate, Takashi pauses for a final look back at the bamboo grove. In the strengthening morning light, it appears both ancient and eternally young, like something from the time of Princess Kaguya, yet also completely present to this moment. The wind moves through it once more, creating that distinctive hollow music that speaks of spaces within solid things, of emptiness that provides strength rather than weakness. This is perhaps the deepest teaching of the bamboo. That true strength comes not from being filled with rigid certainty, but from maintaining an inner spaciousness that allows for growth, change, and the constant small adjustments that life requires. Like the hollow combs that bend without breaking, like the legendary princess who found wonder in simple moments, like the old bamboo cutter who learned to see his ordinary world as extraordinary, Takashi has discovered that wisdom lies not in accumulating more, but in creating space. Space for breath, for growth, for the wind to pass through without resistance. The morning meditation continues, but now it will take new forms. The careful tending of his garden, the preparation of a simple meal, the 1,000 small acts that make up a day live with complete attention. But the spirit of the bamboo walk will infuse them all, reminding him that every moment offers a choice between rigidity and flexibility, between breaking and bending, between fighting the wind and learning to dance with it. Meditation by the Lake, Part 4. The quiet life of a retired samurai. The path from the bamboo grove leads downward through a gentle slope carpeted with moss and fallen leaves, following the natural contours of the land toward the sound of water. This is not the rushing voice of a mountain stream, but something quieter, more profound, the deep stillness of a lake that has gathered rainwater and mountain springs into perfect repose. For Takashi, this daily pilgrimage to the water's edge represents the deepest phase of his morning practice, the moment when movement gives way to absolute stillness. The lake emerges gradually through the trees, first as glimpses of reflected light dancing between branches, then as an expanding mirror that captures the morning sky and holds it in liquid suspension. It is not a large body of water, perhaps 200 meters across at its widest point, but proportions seem perfect for contemplation, intimate enough to feel embracing, yet vast enough to suggest infinite depth. Ancient cherry trees line the shore, their gnarled branches reaching toward the water like arms extended in blessing. It is autumn now, past the spectacular flowering of spring, but the trees still offer their gifts. Scattered petals from a late-blooming variety drift on the lake's surface, creating temporary mandalas of pink and white that form and dissolve according to the subtle currents beneath. Takeshi approaches his customary spot, a flat stone position at the lake's edge where the water is clear enough to reveal the smooth pebbles at the bottom. This boulder has been worn smooth by countless seasons of rain and sun, shaped by time into a natural seat that seems designed for meditation. He has come here every morning for 7 years, and the stone has become as familiar as an old friend, holding the memory of his presence in its sun-warmed surface. Before settling into position, he performs a small ritual of arrival. Removing his sandals, he feels the cool earth beneath his feet, the slight give of moss and fallen leaves, the solid reality of stone and soil that grounds him in this moment and place. He bows slightly toward the lake, a gesture of respect for the water that mirrors the sky, for the fish that make their home beneath its surface, for the countless forms of life that depend on its gift of sustenance. The process of assuming the lotus position is itself a meditation. First, the right foot placed on the left thigh, then the left foot drawn up to rest on the right thigh. His aged joints protest slightly, this flexibility maintained through daily practice but no longer taken for granted. Each adjustment is made with patience and self-compassion, understanding that the body, like everything else in nature, changes with the seasons of life. His hands settle into the cosmic mudra, left hand resting in right palm, thumbs lightly touching to form a circle. This simple hand position has been used by meditators for over 2,000 years, a gesture that symbolizes a unity of apparent opposites, the completion that comes when all seeking ceases and one simply rests in being itself. Takeshi's spine finds its natural curve, neither rigid nor collapsed, like a tree that grows straight while remaining supple. His shoulders drop away from his ears, releasing the subtle tension that accumulates even in the most peaceful lives. His eyes, neither fully closed nor completely open, settle into the soft gaze of Zazen, aware but not focused, receptive but not seeking, present to whatever arises without grasping or pushing away. The lake before him serves as both mirror and teacher. Its surface reflects the morning clouds with such clarity that it becomes impossible to say where sky ends and water begins. Yet beneath this perfect mirroring lies depth that the eye cannot penetrate, mystery that invites contemplation without demanding answers. The water is simultaneously transparent and opaque, revealing and concealing, simple and infinitely complex. Begin with the breath. Takeshi whispers to himself, invoking the fundamental instruction of Zen meditation. Not the breath as we imagine it should be, but the breath as it actually is in this moment, in this body, carrying whatever it carries. His attention settles on the soft sensation of air entering and leaving his nostrils. The breath comes without his willing it, a gift from the autonomic wisdom that keeps the heart beating and the cells dividing. In the morning stillness, each inhalation brings a cool, moist air that rises from the lake's surface, carried with it the mineral scent of deep water and the green fragrance of aquatic plants. As he breathes, ripples move across the lake's surface, not from wind, for the air is nearly still, but from the gentle movement of the koi that make their home in these protected waters. These fish, descendants of carp brought from distant lands generations ago, have adapted to the lake's rhythms, becoming part of its living meditation. Their movements are unhurried, purposeful without urgency, a perfect example of what Zen masters call effortless effort. One particularly large koi surfaces near the shore, its scales catching the morning light like pieces of living jewelry. The fish moves with the kind of presence that Takeshi has spent years cultivating himself, completely absorbed in the current moment, responsive to its environment without being reactive, carrying itself with dignity that comes not from pride but from simple self-acceptance. The dragon sleeps beneath still waters, he murmurs, remembering a story his teacher once told him about this very lake. Long ago, so the legend goes, a great dragon made its home in the deepest part of these waters. Unlike the dragons of conquest and hoarding found in Western tales, this was a creature of wisdom and protection, guardian of the lake's purity and teacher of those who approached with humble hearts. The villagers fear the dragon at first, imagining it as a creature of destruction who might rise from the depths to bring flood and chaos. But years passed, and the dragon never appeared to threaten or demand tribute. Instead, the lake remained clear and pure, its fish healthy and abundant, its waters a source of life for all the surrounding valley. One day, a young samurai, proud and eager to make his reputation, came to the lake determined to slay the dragon and win honor for his courage. He stood at the water's edge and shouted challenges, struck the surface with his sword, and declared his intention to rid the region of this menace. But the lake remained perfectly still, reflecting only his own angry face back at him. Day after day, the samurai returned, his challenges growing louder and more desperate. He was convinced that the dragon was hiding, that his courage was being tested by a cowardly creature who dared not face him in honest combat. But the lake gave no response except its own deep silence. Frustrated and exhausted, the samurai finally sat down at the water's edge, not to meditate, but simply because he had no more energy for shouting and sword-waving. As his breathing slowed and his agitation settled, he began to notice things he had overlooked in his fury. The perfect clarity of the water, the graceful movement of fish beneath the surface, the way clouds drifted across the lake's mirror like thoughts across a peaceful mind. Hours passed without the young warrior realizing it. His anger dissolved into curiosity, his urgency into patience. When the dragon finally appeared, rising slowly from the depths with no splash or disturbance, the samurai felt no fear, only wonder. The creature was magnificent beyond imagining, its scales reflecting every color of the rainbow, its eyes holding depths that seemed to contain all the wisdom of ages. "You have been calling for me," the dragon said, its voice like the sound of water over stones. "But I could not appear until you became still enough to see me." True strength is not found in the sword that strikes, but in the mind that remains calm in all circumstances. The mightiest warrior is not the one who conquers enemies, but the one who conquers the restlessness of their own heart. The samurai understood then that his greatest battle was not with any external foe, but with the agitation and pride that prevented him from seeing clearly. The dragon had been present all along, not hidden but invisible to eyes clouded by anger and ambition. Only when he learned to sit in stillness could he perceive the wisdom that surrounded him. Takeshi smiles softly as he recalls the story, understanding how it mirrors his own journey from warrior to contemplative. Like the young samurai in the legend, he had spent years believing that strength came from action, from the ability to overcome obstacles through force and determination. But the lake has taught him, as the dragon taught the samurai, that the deepest power lies in stillness, in the capacity to remain centered regardless of circumstances. A gentle splash draws his attention back to the present moment. One of the koi has leaped partially out of the water, perhaps taking an insect from the air, before settling back with barely a ripple. The fish's movement is so perfectly integrated with its environment that it creates harmony rather than disturbance, adding to the lake's beauty rather than disrupting it. Breathe like the lake receives rain. Takeshi instructs himself, using a phrase that has become central to his practice. Not grasping after air, not pushing breath away, but allowing each moment of breathing to flow naturally into the next, like water finding its own level. His breath begins to deepen without effort, expanding not just his lungs but his entire torso, creating space for whatever thoughts and feelings arise. A memory surfaces. Standing guard duty on winter nights during his military service, learning to stay alert without tension, responsive without reactivity. The skills he developed then serve him now in a different way, helping him maintain awareness without struggle, presence without force. Minutes pass, or perhaps hours. Time moves differently in meditation, following the rhythms of consciousness rather than the clock. Takeshi notices thoughts arising like bubbles from the lake's bottom. Memories of conversations with his wife before her death, concerns about the changing seasons and what they might bring, plans for small improvements to his garden. Each thought is acknowledged without judgment, allowed to surface and dissolve back into the stillness from which it came. The cherry blossoms floating on the lake's surface have drifted closer to shore, creating a mandala of impermanence that shifts with each subtle current. Some petals are fresh and pink, others have begun to brown at the edges. Still others have become so waterlogged they hover just beneath the surface like ghosts of former beauty. This too is part of the teaching. the recognition that all things arise, change, and pass away, and that this process is not a flaw in existence, but its very essence. The dragon of wisdom, Takashi reflects, appears not when we demand it, but when we create the conditions for its emergence. Stillness is not emptiness, but fullness. Full attention, full presence, full acceptance of what is. A water strider skates across the lake's surface nearby, its legs creating tiny dimples but never breaking through. The insect moves with absolute confidence, trusting in surface tension and its own lightness to support it on the boundary between air and water. There is a lesson here about walking lightly through life, about finding support in things that seem insubstantial, about trusting in the invisible forces that sustain all existence. The sun has climbed higher now, its rays penetrating the lake's surface to illuminate the world beneath. Schools of smaller fish move in synchronized patterns, their silver sides flashing like scattered coins. Aquatic plants sway in currents that exist far below the surface, following rhythms that connect to forces much larger than themselves. The pull of moon and earth, the circulation of waters that links this small lake to rivers and oceans, and the vast cycle of evaporation and precipitation that sustains all life. Takeshi's meditation deepens, his sense of boundary between self and surroundings beginning to dissolve. He becomes aware of breathing not just his own breath, but the breath of the forest around him. Trees exhaling oxygen that he inhales, his exhalation providing the carbon dioxide that feeds their photosynthesis. The lake breathes too, in its own way, absorbing oxygen from the air, releasing moisture that rises to form clouds, participating in the planet's great respiratory system. This is what the dragon knew. He understands with sudden clarity. That separation is an illusion created by surface perception. Beneath the appearance of individual things lies an interconnected wholeness where everything participates in everything else. Where true strength comes not from standing apart, but from recognizing one's place in the infinite web of relationship. A light breeze stirs the lake's surface, creating ripples that catch and scatter the sunlight into thousands of dancing points of brilliance. Each wavelet reflects light at a slightly different angle, creating a constantly shifting pattern of illumination that is never the same from one moment to the next. Yet underlying this surface movement, the lake remains essentially still, its deep waters undisturbed by the play of wind and light above. This becomes a perfect metaphor for the mind in meditation. Thoughts and emotions arising and passing like ripples on the surface, while awareness itself remains like the deep stillness beneath, unchanging and vast. The goal is not to eliminate the ripples, but to recognize one's identity with the depths rather than with the surface disturbances. As the meditation session nears its natural conclusion, Takeshi begins a gentle process of returning to ordinary consciousness. First, deeper attention to breath, then small movement of fingers and toes, gradually reawakening the body that has been sitting so still. His eyes open fully, taking in the lake's beauty with fresh appreciation, as if seeing it for the first time. The koi are still moving in their unhurried patterns, the cherry blossoms still floating on currents too subtle to see. But something has shifted in his perception. The same scene that greeted him when he first sat down now seems more vivid, more alive, pregnant with meanings that can be felt but not easily expressed in words. Rising from the lotus position requires the same mindful attention as assuming it. Each movement is slow and deliberate, honoring the body that has supported this period of stillness, acknowledging the legs that may tingle with returning circulation, the back that has maintained its upright posture throughout the meditation. Standing at the lake's edge, Takeshi places his palms together and bows once more, to the water that has served as his teacher, to the fish that have shared their wisdom of effortless movement, to the invisible dragon of wisdom that appears only when a heart becomes still enough to recognize its presence. The meditation is complete, but its effects will ripple through the remaining hours of his day like waves spreading across still water, touching everything with the quality of presence cultivated in these moments of profound stillness. The path back to his house leads upward to the same trees he descended earlier, but the journey feels different now. Not a return to ordinary life, but continuation of the same meditation expressed through walking, through the simple pleasure of feeling earth beneath his feet, through gratitude for the gift of another morning spent in communion with the deeper currents that sustain all existence. The Stone Garden Karasansui. Part 5. The Quiet Life of a Retired Samurai. The return from the lake brings Takeshi to perhaps the most intimate space of his daily practice. the Karasansui, or dry landscape garden, that occupies a rectangular court beside his home. This garden contains no water, no plants, no growing things in conventional sense, yet it pulses with a life all its own. Here, in an area no larger than a modest room, the essence of vast landscapes is distilled into arrangements of stone and carefully raked sand that speak to something deeper than the eye can see. The garden is enclosed on 3 sides by low wooden walls weathered to a soft gray that harmonizes perfectly with the pale sand and darker stones. The 4th side opens toward his house, where a covered veranda provides a viewing platform for contemplation. But this morning, as every morning, Takashi enters the garden not as observer but as participant, not to gaze upon its perfection, but participate in its daily recreation. Against the wall stands a wooden rack, holding his tools, bamboo rakes of various sizes, each worn smooth by years of use, each designed for different aspects of the work. The largest, with teeth spaced wide apart, is used for the broad, sweeping motions that create the garden's primary patterns. Medium-sized rakes serve for more detailed work around the stones, while the smallest, no bigger than a child hand, allows for the finest adjustments, the subtle corrections that transform good patterns into perfect ones. Takashi selects the largest rake first, feeling its familiar weight in his hands. The handle has been polished by countless hours of use until it seems to mold itself to his grip. The bamboo tines, originally straight and uniform, have each taken on its own slight character through wear, some slightly curved, others bearing the microscopic nicks that come from contact with hidden pebbles in the sand. These imperfections do not diminish the tool's effectiveness. Rather, they create the subtle variations in line and texture that make hand-rake patterns infinitely more beautiful than any machine could produce. The sand itself is not ordinary sand, but a special mixture chosen for its color, texture, and the way it holds the patterns carved into its surface. Composed primarily of decomposed granite with a small amount of clay to provide binding, it has been sifted repeatedly to achieve perfect uniformity. When properly maintained, it holds the sharpest lines while remaining soft enough to rake without excessive effort. The color is neither pure white nor gray, but something in between, a subtle tone that changes throughout the day as light shifts across its surface. Before beginning the raking, Takashi performs a small ritual of preparation. He removes his sandals at the garden's edge, understanding that even the softest footwear would disturb the patterns he is about to create. His bare feet on the sand create a different kind of connection, a tactile awareness of texture and temperature that informs his work. The sand is cool in the morning shade, slightly damp from the night's dew, perfect for holding clean lines. The garden contains 15 stones of various sizes, arranged in 5 groupings according to principles that combine aesthetic beauty with symbolic meaning. These are not ordinary rocks, but carefully selected specimens, each chosen for its shape, color, and the way it seems to embody natural forces frozen in mineral form. Some suggest mountains rising from misty valleys. Others resemble islands emerging from calm seas. The largest stone, positioned slightly off-center in accordance with the asymmetrical principles of Japanese aesthetics, has the presence of an ancient patriarch, its weathered surface telling stories of geological time. Takashi begins his work at the garden's far end, where yesterday's patterns have been softened by the settling action of gravity and the almost imperceptible movements of air. The first stroke of the rake is always the most important. It establishes the rhythm and direction that will govern all that follows. He draws the tines of the sand in a long, smooth arc, feeling the slight resistance that confirms the sand's perfect consistency. The furrows left behind are parallel and evenly spaced, creating the foundational pattern for which all other designs will emerge. Each line, he murmurs to himself, settling into the meditative rhythm of the work, is both itself and part of a larger whole, like thoughts in meditation, like moments in a life, individual yet inseparable from the pattern they create together. The raking motion engages his entire body in a coordinated dance. His feet maintain balance and direction. His legs provide stability. His torso supplies the smooth rotation that keeps the lines flowing. His arms and hands guide the rake with precision while allowing it to follow its natural movement through the sand. After decades of practice, these movements have become as natural as breathing, requiring no conscious effort yet capable of infinite refinement. As he works, Takashi's mind drifts to an ancient story that has long inspired his approach to this garden. The legend of the 7 sages of the bamboo grove. During the tumultuous 3rd century in China, when political upheaval made public life dangerous for thoughtful men, 7 scholars retreated from court to live simply in a bamboo grove outside the capital. There, far from the intrigues and violence of imperial politics, they discovered that wisdom could be found not in grand gestures or complex philosophies, but in the patient appreciation of simple, natural things. The 7 sages, Ruanji, Ji Kong, Shantao, Lu Ling, Ruan Xian, Xiangxiu, and Wang Rong, were not hermits in the sense of complete withdrawal from the world. Rather, they were men who had learned to find or found meaning in activities that others might dismiss as trivial. Composing poetry while watching clouds, making music from the sound of wind through bamboo, finding mathematical principles in the arrangement of stones around a fire. Their genius lay not in escaping from life, but in discovering the extraordinary within the ordinary. Ji Kong, perhaps the most famous of 7, was said to have achieved enlightenment while working at his forge, hammering metal into tools and weapons. The repetitive action of striking iron, the rhythmic breathing required for sustained physical work, the total concentration necessary for precision, all of these combined to create a state of meditation in motion. Observers would find him at his anvil for hours, his face serene with concentration, his movements flowed with the effortless efficiency that comes when skill transcends technique to become art. Similarly, Ruanji discovered profound truths while tending his garden, not in the grand landscape gardens of the wealthy, but in a simple plot where he grew vegetables for his table. The daily tasks of weeding, watering, and harvesting became opportunities for contemplation. He would observe how each plant responded to care, how the soil revealed its needs through color and texture, how the subtle relationships between sun, water, and earth created the conditions for growth. In these simple observations, he found principles that applied to human development, political organization, and the cultivation of wisdom. Takeshi sees his own relationship with the stone garden in this tradition. Each morning's raking is not merely maintenance, but a form of active meditation, a way of thinking with his hands while allowing his mind to settle into the kind of clarity that comes only through sustained, mindful action. The patterns he creates are temporary. They will be softened by wind and weather, requiring tomorrow's renewal, but their impermanence is part of their teaching, a daily reminder that beauty lies not in permanence, but in the willingness to create freshly in each moment. Moving around the largest stone grouping, Takeshi adjusts his technique to accommodate the irregular contours where sand meets mineral. Here, the rake must move more slowly, more carefully, following the stone's natural lines while maintaining the overall pattern's integrity. These transitions require the most skill, the ability to bend rules without breaking them, to adapt principles without abandoning them. In his former life as a samurai, similar principles applied to combat. The need to maintain form while responding fluidly to changing circumstances, the discipline that allows spontaneity rather than constraining it. The morning sun has climbed higher now, beginning to illuminate the garden from a different angle. This changing light reveals aspects of the patterns that were invisible moments before, subtle variations in depth and texture. The way certain furrows catch and hold shadows, while others seem to glow with reflected brilliance. The garden is never quite the same from one hour to the next, never exactly the same from one viewing angle to another. It exists in constant dialogue with its environment, responsive to every change in weather and light, while maintaining its essential character. The sages understood. Takeshi reflects as he works on a particularly intricate section around a cluster of smaller stones, that true freedom comes not from having unlimited choices, but from finding infinite depth within simple activities. They could have spent their lives in pursuit of wealth, power, or fame, but they chose instead to become masters of attention, experts in the art of being fully present to whatever they were doing. This mastery of attention is what transforms ordinary activities into spiritual practice. The 7 sages were not remarkable for what they did, gardening, music making, poetry, metalworking, but for how completely they inhabited their actions. They understood that enlightenment is not a destination to be reached, but a quality of awareness to be cultivated, moment by moment, through whatever life presents. The rake moves now in shorter strokes as Takeshi works on the garden's most complex section, where several stone groupings create narrow channels that require precise navigation. Here, the patterns must flow around obstacles while maintaining their essential rhythm, like water finding its way through a rocky stream bed. Each turn of the rake must be calculated yet natural, planned yet spontaneous. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of the work, the need to think several moves ahead while remaining completely present to the current stroke. As he navigates these tight spaces, Takashi remembers Wang Rong, the youngest of the seven sages, who was famous for his ability to find beauty in the most constrained circumstances. When others complained about the limitations of their retreat, Wang Rong would point out how restrictions could serve as creative challenges, forcing innovation and deeper appreciation of simple pleasures. "A bird in a cage that sings beautifully," he once wrote, "may teach us more about freedom than an eagle soaring over mountains." The stone garden embodies this principle perfectly. Its small size and limited materials, just sand, stone, and the patterns created by raking, could be seen as severe restrictions. But within these constraints lies infinite possibility. The same 15 stones can suggest entirely different landscapes depending on how the sand around them is patterned. Concentric circles around a central stone evoke ripples spreading from a drop pebble. Parallel lines running from wall to wall suggest ocean swells approaching a distant shore. Diagonal patterns create a sense of movement and energy, while curves introduce fluidity and grace. Today, Takashi finds himself creating a combination pattern. Parallel lines in the main field that gradually curve as they approach the stone groupings, then swirl around them in loose spirals before resuming their linear flow. The effect suggests both order and organic movement, structure and spontaneity held in perfect balance. It is a pattern he has never created exactly this way before, emerging from his hands without conscious planning, guided by years of experience but fresh with spontaneous discovery. This is how the sages lived, he realizes, following principles so deeply internalized that they could trust intuition, allowing wisdom to express itself through hands and heart without the interference of overthinking mind. The larger patterns now complete, Takashi exchanges his wide rake for a medium-sized one to refine the details. This phase of the work requires different skills, not the broad, flowing movements of the initial patterning, but the careful precision needed to create clean transitions and perfect curves. Each line must connect smoothly with its neighbors. Each circle must be truly round. Each spiral must maintain consistent spacing from center to edge. The morning air carries the sound of temple bells from the village below, their bronze voices marking the passage of time without urgency. Takashi pauses in his work to listen, using the moment to assess his progress with fresh eyes. The garden is perhaps two-thirds complete, its major elements established, but awaiting the final touches that will bring everything into perfect harmony. The stones seem to float on their bed of patterned sand like ships on a stylized sea, each one occupying exactly the right position to balance the composition. Working now with the smallest rake, Takashi addresses the finest details. The areas immediately adjacent to each stone where the patterns must be most precise, where any irregularity will be immediately visible to the trained eye. These final touches require not only technical skill but aesthetic judgment, the ability to know when a line is perfect and when it needs the slightest adjustment. Too much refinement can make patterns look mechanical and lifeless. Too little leave them feeling unfinished and crude. The smallest rake allows for movements almost like calligraphy, each stroke carrying intentionality and grace. Here, Takashi draws inspiration from Xiang Xiu, the scholar among the seven sages who was renowned for his elegant handwriting. Xiang Xiu taught that each character written with brush and ink was both a conveyor of meaning and a work of art in itself. The formation of each stroke, the balance of space and line, the rhythm of the hand moving across paper, all of these elements contributed to a deeper communication than words alone could achieve. Writing and raking. Takashi muses as he creates a series of delicate curves around a small, triangular stone. Both require the union of technique and spirit, the marriage of conscious intention with unconscious flow. The hand must be trained, but it must also be free to express what the heart knows without the mind's interference. The final phase of the garden creation involves the most delicate work of all, the subtle adjustments that transform a good pattern into a perfect one. Here, individual lines may be deepened slightly, curves refined by fractions of inches, transitions smoothed until they flow like music made visible. This work cannot be hurried. It requires the kind of patience that comes only from understanding that the process itself is more important than the result. As Takashi makes these final refinements, He thinks of Lu Ling, the sage who was famous for his appreciation of wine and his philosophical approach to intoxication. Lu Ling understood that true intoxication came not from alcohol, but from complete absorption in whatever one was doing. Whether writing poetry, observing clouds, or simply sitting in contemplation, he could become so fully present to the activity that ordinary consciousness dissolved into a state of unified awareness where doer, doing, and deed became one. The stone garden offers a similar form of intoxication, the complete absorption that comes from work requiring total attention, yet engaging the deepest levels of aesthetic sensitivity. Hours can pass without awareness of time's passage, the self dissolving into the rhythm of rake through sand, individual consciousness expanding to encompass the entire garden and the principles of harmony it represents. The morning's work is nearly complete now. Takeshi steps back to view the garden from different angles, checking for any asymmetries that need correction, any lines that break the overall flow. The patterns that achieve that quality of inevitability that marks truly successful art. They look as if they could not possibly be any other way, as if they have always existed in exactly this form. Yet he knows that tomorrow morning he will rake them away and begin again, creating something similar yet entirely new. This daily cycle of creation and dissolution embodies one of the deepest teachings of Buddhist philosophy, the recognition that all phenomena are impermanent, that clinging to any particular form or arrangement leads inevitably to suffering. But the stone garden teaches a different relationship to impermanence, not resignation or indifference, but the joy that comes from creating beauty without attachment to its preservation, finding fulfillment in the process rather than the product. Cleaning his rakes and returning them to their proper places, Takeshi performs one final ritual. He walks slowly around the garden's perimeter, viewing his morning's work from every angle, appreciating the way different perspectives reveal different qualities in the patterns. From one viewpoint, the arrangement suggests a seascape with islands and currents. From another, it resembles an aerial view of rivers winding through valleys. From a third, it becomes an abstract meditation on the relationship between emptiness and form. The 7 sages of the bamboo grove would have understood this multiplicity of meanings, this refusal to reduce beauty to any single interpretation. They found wisdom not in dogmatic certainties, but in the willingness to remain open to whatever revelations might emerge from patient attention to simple things. They knew that a garden, like a life, reveals its deepest truths not to those who grasp after meaning, but to those who cultivate the kind of receptive awareness that allows meaning to reveal itself naturally. Standing at the garden's edge, Takeshi places his palms together in a gesture of gratitude, to the stones that anchor the patterns, to the sand that receives them, to the rake that serves as intermediary between intention and expression, to the ancient tradition that has preserved this practice across centuries, and to the morning itself that has provided the time and space for this quiet act of creation. The garden is complete, but like all true completion, it represents not an ending but a beginning, the start of a day whose every activity will be informed by the mindfulness cultivated in these moments of total presence, the awareness that any simple action, performed with complete attention and reverence, can become a gateway to the infinite. Contemplative Calligraphy, Shodo. Part 6. The Quiet Life of a Retired Samurai. The completion of the stone garden marks a natural transition in Takeshi's morning rhythm, from the large movements of raking to the intimate precision of brush and ink. His studio awaits, a modest room that serves as sanctuary for the most contemplative of his daily practices. Here, surrounded by the tools and traditions of Japanese calligraphy, he will spend the next portion of his morning in communion with written characters that are simultaneously words, images, and prayers. The studio occupies the quietest corner of his house, positioned to receive the gentle northern light that calligraphers prize for its consistency and lack of harsh shadows. The room is spared by necessity and choice. Any unnecessary objects would distract from the profound concentration that Shodo requires. A low writing table of aged paulownia would sit at the room's center, its surface worn smooth by decades of use, its grain following patterns that seem to echo the flowing lines of masterful brushstrokes. Above the table hangs a single scroll bearing a work by the great master Sesshu, its characters embodying the perfect balance between power and grace that Takeshi aspires to in his own practice. The brushwork flows with the confidence of complete mastery, each stroke carrying both the weight of tradition and the freshness of spontaneous expression. This scroll serves not as decoration but as silent teacher, reminding him daily of the heights that patient practice can achieve. On a shelf beside the writing table, Takeshi's materials wait in perfect order. The Suzuri, grinding stone, sits alongside sticks of solid ink that will be transformed into liquid through the meditative process of grinding with water. Brushes of various sizes hang from a wooden stand, their tips protected by bamboo caps, their handles polished by countless hours of use. Each brush has its own character, its own way of holding and releasing ink, its own particular strength in creating different types of strokes. The paper, too, is chosen with care. Today he will use washi, handmade paper whose slightly irregular texture and subtle variations in thickness create the perfect surface for absorbing ink while allowing for controlled bleeding that gives shoto its distinctive character. Each sheet represents hours of traditional papermaking, mulberry fibers beaten and formed by artisans who understand that the ground for art is itself an art requiring patience and skill. Takeshi begins his practice with the ritual preparation of ink, a process that serves as meditation in itself. He places a small amount of water in the depression of Suzuri, then takes up a stick of solid ink, sumi, made from soot and animal glue pressed into a hard block decorated with gold characters. The grinding motion is circular and rhythmic, requiring just enough pressure to release the ink particles without rushing the process that will determine the quality of every character he writes. As he grinds, Takeshi's mind turns to the figure who more than any other embodies the spiritual dimension of calligraphy. Kukai, known posthumously as Kobo Daisher, the great monk and scholar who lived more than 1,000 years ago. Kukai was not merely a calligrapher but a polymath whose contributions to Japanese culture encompass religion, philosophy, literature, and the arts. Yet it was through his revolutionary understanding of writing as spiritual practice that he achieved his most profound insights. Born into an aristocratic family in 774, Kukai seemed destined for a conventional career in government service. But like many sensitive souls in times of transition, he found himself drawn instead to the deeper questions that worldly success could not answer. At the age of 24, he left Japan for China, where he studied esoteric Buddhism under Master Huigua, absorbing not only religious teachings, but also the Chinese tradition of calligraphy as meditation. When Kukai returned to Japan, he brought with him a revolutionary understanding that the act of writing sacred characters could itself be a form of spiritual practice, a way of embodying wisdom rather than merely describing it. For Kukai, each brushstroke was a prayer, each character a mandala, each completed work of meditation on the interpenetration of form and emptiness that lies at the heart of Buddhist teaching. The ink has reached the proper consistency now, neither too thick nor too thin, flowing smoothly from a brush while maintaining enough body to create lines that hold their shape without bleeding excessively. Takeshi tests the mixture by painting a few strokes on practice paper, observing how the ink behaves, making small adjustments until the relationship between liquid and brush achieves perfect harmony. Selecting a medium-sized brush, one capable of both bold strokes and fine details, Takeshi loads it carefully with ink. The brush must hold enough ink to complete an entire character without reloading, but not so much that it drips or creates irregular lines. This balance point exists in a narrow range that can only be learned through years of practice, until the hand knows intuitively how much ink the brush can hold and how much pressure is needed to release it in control measure. The first character Takeshi chooses to write is Wa, peace or harmony. In its traditional form, this character suggests a perfect balance between human activity and natural order, individual will and universal flow. The character begins with a horizontal stroke that must be both strong and graceful, establishing the foundation for everything that follows. Takeshi's brush touches the paper with the confidence of long practice, moving from left to right with steady pressure that creates a line of consistent width and darkness. Each subsequent stroke builds upon this foundation, but none can be executed mechanically. The vertical line that follows must connect seamlessly with the horizontal while maintaining its own character and weight. The smaller strokes that complete the character require different techniques, some light and quick, others deliberate and strong. All must work together to create a unified whole that embodies the very quality of peace it represents. Kukai taught, Takeshi murmurs as he completes the character, that writing sacred characters is like building a temple with each brushstroke. Every line must be placed not only in the right position but with the right intention, the right awareness, the right reverence for the tradition being carried forward. The completed character sits on the paper like a living thing, its black lines seeming to pulse with energy against a white ground. This is one of the miracles of Shoto, how mere ink on paper can convey not just meaning but presence, not just information but spiritual force. The character, while written hastily, conveys its dictionary definition. Written with complete presence and technical mastery, it becomes an embodiment of peace itself, radiating the quality it names. Moving to a fresh section paper, Takeshi prepares to write Chi, wisdom. This character presents different challenges, requiring strokes that move in multiple directions while maintaining perfect balance and proportion. The brush must dance across the paper with confidence, each movement flowing naturally into the next without hesitation or correction. In Shoto, there is no erasing, no going back. Each character must emerge complete and perfect in a single burst of concentrated expression. The process of creating Chi becomes a meditation on wisdom itself. What is wisdom but the perfect coordination of knowledge and intuition, experience and openness, strength and flexibility? As the brush moves through the character's complex structure, Takeshi embodies these qualities in his own movement, drawing upon decades of training while remaining completely present to this unique moment of creation. Kukai understood that the physical act of writing could transform consciousness in ways that merely reading or thinking about wisdom could not achieve. When the hand moves in harmony with mind and heart to create sacred characters, something alchemical occurs. The writer becomes not just a copier of traditional forms, but a participant in their essential meaning. The character for wisdom, written with complete presence, becomes a seed of wisdom planted in both the writer's consciousness and in the consciousness of anyone who later contemplates the finished work. The morning light has shifted subtly, creating different shadows and highlights in the studio. Takeshi pauses to reload his brush, using this moment to appreciate the character he has just completed. Chi sits on the paper with the quiet authority of true understanding, not flashy or demanding attention, but radiating the calm confidence that comes from deep knowing. The proportions are perfect. The strokes flow with natural grace, yet something more than technical skill is evident in every line. For his third character, Takeshi chooses to say, serenity. This is perhaps the most challenging of the three, requiring strokes that seem to flow effortlessly while maintaining perfect structural integrity. The character suggests the state of mind he has been cultivating throughout his retirement. Not the deadness of suppressed emotion, but the dynamic stillness of complete acceptance, awareness without agitation, responsiveness without reactivity. As he prepares to write, Takeshi recalls one of Kukai's most profound insights, that consciousness itself is like a brush loaded with the ink of wisdom, capable of painting enlightenment across the paper of experience. Just as a calligrapher must maintain perfect awareness of brush position, ink flow, and paper texture, so must the spiritual practitioner maintain awareness of mind, body, and environment, allowing each moment to unfold with the same precision and grace as a perfect brushstroke. The first stroke of, say, requires enormous confidence, a long, curved line that establishes a character's essential energy and must be completed without hesitation. Takeshi's breath deepens as he prepares, his mind settling into a kind of focused stillness that allows intuitive wisdom to guide conscious technique. The brush touches paper and begins its journey, creating a line that seems to breathe with life, expanding and contracting with natural rhythm while maintaining its essential trajectory. Each subsequent stroke builds upon this foundation, but all must be created with the same quality of presence. There can be no thinking ahead to the next stroke while creating the current one, no dwelling on the previous line while painting the present one. This complete absorption in the immediate moment is what Kukai meant when he spoke of writing as samadhi, the state of meditation in which the meditator becomes one with the object of meditation. As the character nears completion, Takeshi finds himself entering that timeless space where technical skill transcends itself to become pure expression. His hand moves without conscious direction, guided by years of training that have become so integrated they operate below the level of thought. Yet this automatic functioning is not mechanical but alive with awareness, responsive to the subtle requirements of each moment. The final stroke completes Sei with a flourish that seems both inevitable and surprising, exactly right yet somehow unexpected, like the perfect ending to a piece of music that satisfies while still maintaining an element of mystery. The character sits on the paper radiating the very quality of serenity it represents, Its lines flow with the ease of water, finding its natural course. Looking at the three characters arranged on his paper, peace, wisdom, serenity, Takashi sees not just words but a mandala qualities that have become the foundation of his daily life. Each character embodies years of practice, not just in calligraphy but in living. They represent not abstract concepts but lived experiences, qualities cultivated through patient attention to the small details of ordinary existence. This is what Kukai discovered in his own practice. Takashi reflects as he cleans his brush with careful attention that the highest teachings are not found in complex philosophical systems, but in the complete embrace of simple activities. Whether grinding ink, loading a brush, or forming a character, each action becomes a gateway to enlightenment when performed with absolute presence and reverence. The cleaning of the brush requires the same mindful attention as its use. Each stroke of the brush against the cleaning cloth must remove ink thoroughly while preserving the brush's shape and spring. The brush that serves faithfully deserves careful maintenance, just as the body that serves spiritual practice deserves respectful care, just as the mind that seeks wisdom deserves patient training. Takashi prepares a fourth character now, Mu, representing emptiness or void. This is perhaps the most paradoxical character in the Buddhist lexicon, pointing to that which cannot be grasped by ordinary thinking yet underlies all experience. The character itself is simple in structure but profound in implication, requiring a quality of brushwork that embodies the very emptiness it represents. Present yet not substantial, definite yet not fixed. As he loads his brush with his final character, Takashi recalls Kukai's teaching that emptiness is not nothingness, but fullness beyond measure, the pregnant void from which all possibilities arise. The brush loaded with ink embodies this principle. It appears to contain something substantial, yet when it touches paper, what emerges is not the ink itself but the character it makes possible, the meaning it allows to manifest. The creation of Mu requires a different quality of attention than the previous characters. Here, the focus must be simultaneously intense and relaxed, holding the character's form clearly in mind while allowing the brush to move with complete spontaneity. It is a paradox that can only be resolved through practice. The need to know exactly what one is doing while letting go of all effort to control the outcome. The brush moves across the paper with movements that seem almost casual yet are precisely calculated. Each stroke of Mu must carry the quality of emptiness while still being substantial enough to be visible, must embody non-attachment while still being committed to perfect execution. This is the highest level of Shoto practice. Not just writing characters, but becoming them, allowing their essential qualities to express themselves through one's entire being. As the character takes shape, Takashi enters a state of consciousness that Kukai would have recognized immediately, the awareness that arises when subject and object dissolve into pure activity. There is no longer a calligrapher writing a character, but simply the process of character being written, the spontaneous emergence of meaning from the marriage of emptiness and form. The completed Mu seems to hover on the paper, substantial yet insubstantial, present yet pointing beyond presence to something that cannot be captured in any form yet makes all forms possible. It is perhaps the most successful character Takashi has written this morning, not because of any technical superiority, but because it most fully embodies the spiritual quality it represents. Sitting back to contemplate his morning's work, Takashi sees the four characters arranged before him like stepping stones across a river: peace, wisdom, serenity, emptiness. Each represents a stage in the spiritual journey, yet all are present simultaneously in the awakened consciousness. They are not goals to be achieved sequentially, but qualities to be cultivated together, each supporting and deepening the others. The studio is filled with the subtle fragrance of ink and paper, the clean scent that comes from the marriage of traditional materials and focused attention. This smell will linger throughout the day, a gentle reminder of the morning's practice, a continuing invitation to bring the same quality of presence to whatever activities follow. Kukai taught that the highest form of religious practice was not separate from ordinary life, but discovered within it through complete engagement with whatever activity presented itself. Whether chanting sutras, writing characters, or simply sweeping floors, each action could become a vehicle for awakening if performed with the right understanding and intention. As Takashi carefully stores his brushes and covers his inkstone, he carries forward the awareness cultivated through calligraphy practice, the recognition that every action, no matter how simple, contains infinite depth when approached with complete presence. The characters he has written will dry and perhaps fade, but the consciousness that created them continues, ready to express itself through whatever the day may bring. The morning Shodo practice is complete, but like all true completion, it marks not an ending but a transformation. The translation of contemplative awareness into active engagement with the world, the continuation of meditation through different means, the understanding that enlightenment is not a destination, but a quality of attention that can illuminate any activity, any moment, any encounter with the endless creativity of existence itself. Sunset at the Temple, Part 7. The quiet life of a retired samurai. The afternoon has passed in quiet contemplation, tending his vegetable garden, mending a section of fence worn by winter storms, preparing and eating a simple meal of rice and seasonal vegetables. Now, as the sun begins its descent toward the western mountains, Takashi feels a familiar pull that draws him each evening to the small temple that has been both witness and sanctuary to the different chapters of his life. The path to the temple winds upward through a grove of ancient cryptomeria trees, their massive trunks creating natural pillars for a cathedral of green. These trees were already centuries old when Takashi first walked this path as a young samurai. Their present a reminder of the continuity that underlies all change. Their bark, deeply furrowed and reddish-brown, seems to glow in the slanted light of approaching sunset, and their towering crowns catch the wind with sound like distant ocean waves. The temple itself is modest, a single-room structure built in the traditional style, with curved roof lines that seem to echo the surrounding mountains and walls that are weathered to a soft gray that harmonizes perfectly with the stone lanterns that line the approach. This is not one of the great temples that attract pilgrims from across the land, but a neighborhood shrine that has served the spiritual needs of local families for more than 300 years. For Takashi, this temple holds the entire arc of his adult life. As a young warrior, he came here to pray for courage before battles, to seek protection for himself and his comrades, to find some meaning in the violence that duty required of him. In his middle years, he visited to mourn fallen friends, to wrestle with doubts about the path he had chosen, to seek guidance in times of political uncertainty. Now, in his retirement, he comes not to ask for anything but to offer gratitude for survival, for peace, for the unexpected gift of quiet years he never dared hope he would live to see. The temple's entrance is guarded by 2 stone lions, their expressions fierce yet protective, their bodies carved with such skill that they seem ready to spring into motion at any moment. These guardian figures have watched over countless visitors, their presence both comforting and awe-inspiring. Takashi pauses before them as he always does, bowing slightly in acknowledgement of their vigilant service, feeling the strange comfort that comes from encountering the familiar after a day of solitude. Inside, the temple is dim and cool, its air heavy with the accumulated fragrance of decades of incense offerings. The main altar houses a statue of Jizo, the bodhisattva who serves as protector of travelers, children, and souls in transition. The figure is carved from dark wood, its surface polished smooth by countless touching hands, its expression radiating the infinite compassion that characterizes his beloved deity. Jizo occupies a unique place in Japanese Buddhism, bridging the gap between the transcendent wisdom of enlightened beings and the immediate needs of ordinary people struggling with life's challenges. Unlike some Buddhist figures who seem removed from worldly concerns, Jizo is portrayed as deeply engaged with human suffering, willing to journey into the darkest realms to offer guidance and protection to those who have lost their way. Takashi approaches the altar with the slow, measured steps that have become natural to him in sacred spaces. He places a small offering of rice and water before the statue, then lights 3 sticks of incense with the care and attention he brings to all his ritual actions. The incense is made from sandalwood and other aromatic woods, its smoke rising in graceful spirals that seem to carry prayers upward to realms beyond ordinary perception. As the fragrant smoke begins to fill the temple space, Takashi settles and decides a position before the altar, his back straight but relaxed, his hands resting comfortably on his thighs. The dying light filtering through the temple's paper windows creates a warm, golden atmosphere that seems to embrace everything in gentle radiance. This is the hour he has come to love most, the threshold time between day and night, when the ordinary world seems to thin and deeper realities become more accessible. "Great Jizo," he whispers, his voice barely audible above the soft crackling of the incense. Guardian of travelers on all paths, I come once again to this place where I have sought your guidance through the many seasons of my life. Tonight I bring not request but gratitude, for safe passage through dangers I could not have imagined, for the gift of arriving at this peaceful shore after storms I thought might destroy me. The statue's serene expression seems to shift slightly in the flickering light, and for a moment Takashi feels a presence that has sustained him through decades of uncertainty. It is not a dramatic visitation, but a subtle deepening of the atmosphere, a sense of being held in awareness larger and more compassionate than his individual consciousness. The legend of Jizo tells of a being who vowed to remain in the cycle of death and rebirth until all sentient beings achieve enlightenment, refusing the peace of nirvana out of compassion for those still struggling in the darkness of ignorance and suffering. This supreme act of selfless love has made Jizo one of the most beloved figures in Japanese religious life, the deity to whom people turn when facing difficult transitions, dangerous journeys, or the loss of loved ones. As Takashi settles deeper into meditation, his mind drifts back across the years to the first time he encountered Jizo's protection in a visceral way. He was 23, part of a military expedition that had gone disastrously wrong. Separated from his unit during a fierce battle, wounded and disoriented, he had wandered for 3 days through enemy territory, surviving on muddy water and wild berries, expecting each moment to be his last. On the third night, delirious with fever and exhaustion, he had collapsed beside a small roadside shrine housing a weathered statue of Jizo. Too weak to continue, he had whispered a prayer asking not for rescue, but for the courage to die with honor. When he awakened at dawn, a village woman was placing fresh flowers at the shrine. Seeing his condition, she had taken him to her home, nursed his wounds, and hidden him until friendly forces arrived to escort him back to safety. "I was lost," he had told the woman as he prepared to leave, "but Jizo guided you to find me." She had smiled with the gentle wisdom of someone who understood mysteries beyond explanation. "Great Jizo guides all who have lost their way," she replied. "But sometimes the guidance comes through human hands, human kindness. We are all travelers helping other travelers reach their destination safely." That encounter had planted a seed that would grow throughout Takashi's career as a warrior. He began to see his own role differently, not simply as an instrument of his Lord's will, but as someone who might serve Jizo's compassionate purpose by protecting others who had lost their way. This shift in understanding didn't make the violence of the profession any easier to bear, but it gave it a different meaning, connecting his individual actions to something larger and more benevolent. The temple's bronze bell begins to sound the evening hour, its deep voice rolling across the valley like a stone dropped into still water. Each strike seems to resonate not just in the air, but in Takashi's bones, awakening sympathetic vibrations in his chest and skull. This bell has marked countless sunsets, called countless souls to prayer, serve as a beacon of stability in a world of constant change. As the bell's voice fades into silence, Takashi becomes aware of other sounds. The soft rustle of wind through the cryptomeria trees outside, the distant call of a crane preparing to roost for night, the almost inaudible whisper of his own breathing. These sounds weave together into a natural symphony that seems to echo the peaceful awareness cultivating in his meditation. Through the temple windows, he can see the western sky beginning to transform as the sun approaches the mountain peaks. What started as clear blue is now tinted with gold, and the first hints of orange and pink are appearing near the horizon. This daily spectacle never fails to move him. The way light itself becomes art as day transitions into night, the way the most magnificent displays of beauty are also the most ephemeral. In my warrior days, Takashi reflects silently, I saw many sunsets from battlefields, never knowing if I would live to see another dawn. Each evening carried the weight of potential finality. Now, in this peaceful time you have granted me, each sunset comes as a gift rather than a possible farewell. The statue of Jizo seems to glow more warmly in the changing light. Its carved features radiating the patient compassion that characterizes his beloved Bodhisattva. According to tradition, Jizo appears in 6 different realms of existence, taking whatever form is needed to guide beings toward liberation from suffering. In the realm of hungry ghosts, Jizo brings food and drink. In the realm of animals, Jizo teaches through example. In the human realm, Jizo appears as teacher, friend, protector, whatever role will best serve each individual's spiritual development. For Takeshi, Jizo has played all these roles at different times. In youth, the Bodhisattva had been protector, shielding him from dangers he was too inexperienced to recognize. In his prime, Jizo had served as moral compass, helping him navigate the ethical complexities of a warrior's life. Now, in retirement, Jizo serves as companion in contemplation, a presence that validates his choice to seek peace over glory, understanding over achievement. The incense sticks have burned down to small glowing embers, their smoke creating shifting patterns in the temple's golden atmosphere. Each spiral seems to carry with it fragments of prayer, gratitude, and aspiration, rising towards something beyond the reach of ordinary perception. Takeshi watches these ephemeral sculptures with the same appreciation he brings to his morning tea ceremony or stone garden practice, finding in temporary beauty a reflection of eternal truths. Outside, the sunset has reached its full glory. The western sky blazes with colors that seem too intense for nature, yet appear before his eyes in all their impossible magnificence. Deep oranges blend into brilliant reds, which fade upward through pink into purple, and finally into first deep blue of night. The mountains stand silhouetted against the celestial fire, like sleeping giants wrapped in robes of shadow. Each sunset is a small death, Takeshi murmurs, remembering words his teacher had spoken decades ago, and each sunrise a small rebirth. Those who learn to appreciate the beauty in endings prepare themselves to recognize the grace in beginnings. The wisdom of this teaching has deepened throughout his retirement. The old samurai who fought for honor and duty has died many small deaths, allowing the contemplative hermit to be born. The man who once found meaning in conflict has gradually transformed into someone who finds richness in silence. These transitions have not been easy. Old identities resist dissolution. Familiar patterns of thought and behavior cling to life long after their usefulness has passed. But each sunset meditation has helped him practice the art of letting go, of finding beauty in the natural cycles of change that govern all existence. As the sun finally touches the mountain peaks, its light takes on an almost otherworldly quality, streaming to the temple windows to illuminate the Jizo statue with what seems like inner radiance. In this moment, the boundary between carved wood and living presence becomes uncertain. The statue's expression appears to shift subtly, as if acknowledging Takeshi's years of faithful visits, his growth from uncertain young warrior to peaceful elder, great protector of travelers. Takeshi whispers as darkness begins to claim the temple interior. I thank you for guiding me safely through all the dangerous passages of my life. But most of all, I thank you for teaching me that the greatest journey is not across landscapes or battlefields, but through the territories of one's own heart, from fear to courage, from anger to compassion, from restlessness to peace. The temple bell sounds again, marking the transition from evening to night. This time its voice seems different. Not the clear bronze tone of daylight hours, but something deeper and more mysterious, as if the bell itself had been transformed by the dying light. The sound seems to come not from the physical instrument, but from some more fundamental source, the vibration that underlies all phenomena. As the last light fades from the western windows, small oil lamps automatically illuminate, casting dancing shadows on the temple walls. These flames have been tended by generations of caretakers, their light representing the continuity of spiritual practice that transcends individual lives. Takeshi feels himself part of this ancient chain, one among countless souls who have found refuge and guidance in this simple space. Rising from his meditation posture, he performs a final bow before the Jizo statue, his palms pressed together in a gesture of profound respect and gratitude. The wooden figure seems to return his acknowledgement with infinite patience and love, the expression that has comforted so many pilgrims throughout the centuries. Before leaving, Takeshi pauses to tend the oil lamps, checking their wicks and fuel levels, ensuring they will burn steadily through the night. This small act of caretaking connects him to all those who have maintained the sacred space, who have understood that spiritual traditions survive not through grand gestures, but through countless small acts of devotion and responsibility. The path back to his house leads through Cryptomeria Grove, now transformed by darkness into a cathedral's shadows. The massive trees seem even more ancient in the night, their presence both protective and mysterious. Overhead, the first stars are beginning to appear, pinpoints of light in the deepening blue that will soon become the rich black of full night. Walking slowly through this natural sanctuary, Takashi carries with him the peace cultivated in evening meditation, the gratitude expressed before Jaizo's compassionate presence, the beauty witnessed in another day's passing. The temple visit has completed the circle begun with morning awakening. From dawn contemplation through active practice to evening gratitude, each phase flowing naturally into the next like movements in a sacred dance. Every day is a journey, he reflects as his house comes into view, its windows glowing warmly in the darkness. From the unknown territory of morning to familiar landscapes of daily activity to mysterious frontier of night. And every day, for those who know how to look, Jaizo travels beside us, offering protection, guidance, and the assurance that no matter how lost we may feel, we are never truly alone. The evening spiritual practice is complete, but like all true completion, it represents not an ending but a transformation. The translation gratitude into preparation for rest, of daylight awareness into nighttime surrender, of conscious practice into the unconscious work of dreams and restoration. In a few hours, morning will come again, bringing new opportunities for contemplation, new occasions of gratitude, new moments to experience the ongoing miracle of awakened awareness expressing itself through the simple activities of a life lived in harmony with the deeper rhythms of existence. Behind him, the temple settles into its nighttime quiet, its oil lamps burning steadily, its Jaizo statue maintaining its eternal vigil over all travelers making their way through the darkness toward whatever dawn awaits them. And in his heart, Takashi carries the certainty that this compassionate presence will continue to guide and protect, as it has for centuries, as it will for centuries to come, offering refuge to every soul who seeks peace after the long journeys of life. Part 8. Silent Dinner, Orioki. The day's training had drawn to a close, and as twilight painted the monastery walls in shades of amber and gold, Takashi found himself seated on a worn tatami mat in the simple dining hall. Before him lay 3 black lacquered bowls, nested one within another, wrapped in a cloth bundle that had been passed down through generations of monks. This was orioki, the ancient practice of formal eating that transformed a simple meal into a profound meditation on gratitude, mindfulness, and the interconnectedness of all life. Master Yamamoto had explained earlier that orioki literally meant just enough, the perfect amount needed to sustain life without excess or waste. Tonight, Takashi would learn that eating, like breathing or walking, could become a gateway to deeper understanding when approached with complete presence and reverence. The hall held 20 other students, each seated in size of position before their own set of bowls. Not a single word had been spoken since they entered this sacred space an hour ago. The silence was not empty or uncomfortable. Rather, it felt full, pregnant with intention and shared purpose. Each movement, each breath, each moment of contact between chopsticks and bowl created a symphony of subtle sounds that seemed to echo the rhythm of the universe itself. Takashi carefully unwrapped his bowls. Following precise choreography, he had observed Master Yamamoto demonstrate. The largest bowl, called the Buddha bowl, would hold rice, the staff of life, representing the body of Buddha himself. The second bowl would contain vegetables, symbolizing the Sangha, the community of practitioners. The smallest bowl was for water or soup, representing the Dharma, the teachings that nourish the spirit. Even the arrangement of these simple vessels carried profound meaning, each element representing one of the 3 jewels of Buddhism. As he positioned his bowls according to the traditional pattern, Takashi reflected on how different this was from the hurried meals he consumed in his previous life. He remembered wolfing down convenience store sandwiches while checking emails or mindlessly snacking while watching television, completely disconnected from the source of his nourishment or the act of eating itself. Here, every grain of rice would be acknowledged, every sip of tea honored, every moment of sustenance treated as a sacred gift. The server approached, an elderly monk whose movements flowed like water, graceful and purposeful. Without speaking, he ladled a portion of steaming rice into Takashi's Buddha bowl. The grains were perfect, each one distinct yet part of the greater whole. As the warm ceramic touched his palms, Takashi felt the heat transfer through his hands, a reminder of the fire that had cooked this rice, the sun that had grown it, the earth that had nurtured it, and all the countless hands that had brought it to this moment. Next came vegetables, simple mountain greens, pickled radish, a small portion of miso seasoned root vegetables. Nothing elaborate or exotic. Yet as Takashi observed their colors and textures, he saw an entire world of interconnection. The green of a vegetable spoke of chlorophyll and photosynthesis, of carbon dioxide transformed into life-giving oxygen, of the infinite dance between plant and atmosphere that sustained all existence. The earth tones of the roots reminded him of the dark soil from which all life emerged, the mycorrhizal networks that connected forest ecosystems, the patient work of countless microorganisms that transformed death into new life. Finally, green tea was poured into his smallest bowl. The liquid was the color of jade, carried within it the essence of mountains and mist, of careful cultivation and mindful preparation. As steam rose from the surface, Takashi caught the subtle fragrance, grassy, clean, alive with the concentrated life force of the tea plant. With all three bowls filled, the true practice began. Takashi lifted his chopsticks with both hands, bowing slightly to acknowledge the meal before him. This bow was not mere formality, but a genuine expression of gratitude to the farmers who had grown this food, to the earth that had provided the nutrients, to the rain and sun that had made growth possible, to the countless beings whose lives had contributed to this moment of nourishment. He began with the rice, taking the smallest possible portion between his chopsticks. As the grains touched his tongue, he was amazed by the complexity of flavors he had never noticed before. There was sweetness, certainly, but also subtle mineral notes that spoke of the particular soil in which this rice had grown. There was a faint nuttiness that hinted at the grain's journey from seed to harvest. Each grain seemed to contain within it the entire story of its existence. The spring planting, the summer rains, the autumn harvest, the patient work of milling and preparation. Takashi chewed slowly, deliberately, feeling the texture change as the saliva began the process of digestion. He became aware of his teeth, his jaw muscles, the complex coordination required for this most basic of human activities. How many times had he eaten without ever truly experiencing eating? How many meals had passed in a blur of distraction and unconscious consumption? As he swallowed, he could feel the rice traveling down his throat, beginning its transformation into energy that would fuel his body's countless processes. He thought of how this simple grain would become part of his cells, how the atoms that compose it would eventually become part of his muscles, his bones, his very being. The boundary between self and food, between inner and outer, began to dissolve in the face of this intimate recognition of interdependence. The vegetables brought different lessons. The pickled radish was sharp and clean, awakening his palate and digestive system with its acidic brightness. As he chewed, Takashi reflected on the fermentation process that had created these flavors, the beneficial bacteria that had transformed simple radish into something more complex and nourishing. Even the process of decay and transformation, he realized, was sacred, part of the endless cycle of life, death, and renewal that governed all existence. The mountain greens carried the essence of wildness, of plants that had grown without human cultivation in the forest surrounding the monastery. Their slightly bitter flavor reminded him that not all nourishment was sweet, that growth sometimes required embracing what was challenging or difficult. As he ate these wild plants, he felt connected to the generations of humans who had foraged for such foods, to the deer and rabbits who shared these same plants, to the entire web of forest life that depended on these humble greens. Between each bite, Takashi would pause, setting down his chopsticks and returning his attention to his breath. The silence in the hall was profound, broken only by the gentle sounds of careful eating, the soft click of chopsticks against ceramic, the quiet rustle of clothing as someone shifted position, the almost imperceptible sound of tea being sipped. These sounds, rather than disturbing the peace, seemed to enhance it, creating a rhythm that connected all the practitioners in shared mindfulness. As he ate, Takashi began to understand what Master Yamamoto had meant when he spoke of just enough. It wasn't simply about portion size, though the modest servings certainly encouraged awareness of what the body truly needed. It was about approaching consumption with consciousness, about recognizing the difference between nourishment and mere gratification, between eating to live and living to eat. He thought of the legend Master Yamamoto had shared earlier about Hotei, the laughing Buddha often depicted with a large belly and a cloth sack full of treats. In popular imagination, Hotei represented abundance and good fortune, his rotund figure suggesting unlimited consumption and material prosperity. But the deeper teaching, Master Yamamoto had explained, was quite different. Hotei's true abundance came not from having much, but from needing little. His laughter arose not from material satisfaction, but from the joy of giving everything away. The sack he carried was filled not with possessions for himself, but with gifts for others, particularly children who would receive his simple candies and toys with delight. His large belly represented not gluttony, but contentment, the deep satisfaction that comes from understanding that true nourishment encompasses far more than food. According to the legend, Hotei would travel from village to village, never accumulating possessions, never seeking comfort or status. When offered elaborate meals by wealthy merchants, he would eat only what he needed and share the rest with beggars and stray animals. When invited to stay in comfortable homes, he would often choose to sleep under the stars, finding his bed in the embrace of the natural world. Children were naturally drawn to Hotei, sensing in him a playfulness and freedom that adults had forgotten. He would teach them games that required no equipment, songs that needed no instruments, stories that cost nothing but attention. His greatest gift to them was not the sweets from his sack, but his presence, completely available, completely engaged, completely joyful in the simple fact of being alive. The legend held that Hotei had once been invited to dine with a great lord who prided himself on serving the most elaborate banquets in the region. 7 courses were presented, each more exotic and expensive than the last, while the other guests consumed with enthusiasm, praising each dish and calling for additional servings. Hotei ate sparingly from only 3 of the courses. When the Lord asked why he wasn't enjoying the feast, Hotei replied with his characteristic laugh, "My lord, I'm enjoying completely. This rice tastes exactly like rice. This vegetable tastes perfectly of vegetable, and this tea is the essence of tea itself. What more could I want?" The Lord, confused, pressed further. "But there are delicacies here from across the empire, rare spices, exotic fruits, preparations that took days to create. Surely you can appreciate the complexity and refinement." Hotei smiled and gestured to the window, where a simple bird was pecking its seeds on the ground. "Watch that sparrow, my lord. Does it need rare spices to find nourishment? Does it require elaborate preparation to experience satisfaction? The bird eats what it needs when it needs it and finds in that simple act complete fulfillment. Its belly is small, but its contentment is infinite." As the evening progressed and the other guests grew heavy and sluggish from overconsumption, Hotei remained light and energetic. When the Lord finally understood the teaching, that true abundance comes from appreciating what is rather than always seeking what isn't, Hotei's laughter filled the hall like temple bells, clear and joyous and awakening. Sitting now in the monastery dining hall, Takashi felt he was beginning to glimpse what Hotei had understood. Each grain of rice was perfect in its simplicity. Each sip of tea contained depths that no elaborate preparation could enhance. The modest meal before him was not lacking anything. Rather, it was complete in its own right, sufficient for nourishment, beautiful in its humility. As he continued eating, Takashi became aware of his body's signals in a way he had never experienced before. He could feel his stomach gradually filling, not with the uncomfortable fullness that came from overeating, but with a gentle satisfaction that seemed to radiate through his entire being. His energy level shifted subtly, not the sharp spike and crash that came from processed foods or excessive portions, but steady, sustainable vitality that felt aligned with his body's natural rhythms. The tea, sipped slowly between bites of food, cleansed his palate and aided digestion. Its warmth spread through his chest and belly, carrying with it a sense of calm alertness. Takashi realized that this simple beverage was performing multiple functions simultaneously, hydrating his body, supporting his digestive system, and creating a meditative pause between portions of food. As the meal drew toward its close, Takashi became acutely aware of how much food remained in his bowls. The practice of oryoki demanded that nothing be wasted, not a single grain of rice, not a drop of tea. This wasn't merely an economic consideration, but a spiritual imperative that acknowledged the preciousness of all life that had contributed to the meal. He began the traditional cleaning ritual, using a piece of pickled radish to wipe clean his Buddha bowl, consuming the radish along with any remaining traces of rice. He then poured a small amount of tea into the bowl, swirling it gently to collect any remaining particles of food, and drank this mixture with the same mindful attention he had brought to the meal itself. This process was repeated with each bowl, a ceremonial acknowledgement that every atom of nourishment was sacred and should be honored. As Takeshi performed these actions, he thought of all the food he had wasted in his previous life. Half-eaten sandwiches thrown away, leftovers forgotten in refrigerators until they spoiled, massive restaurant portions consumed mindlessly until uncomfortable fullness forced him to stop. The cleaning ritual transformed waste into reverence, carelessness into gratitude. Even the water used for cleaning would not be discarded, but would be collected and used to water the monastery gardens, completing the cycle of nourishment that connected meal to soil, to plant to meal once again. As he carefully nested his clean bowls and re-wrapped them in their cloth bundle, Takeshi felt a profound shift in his relationship with food and consumption. This simple meal had been more nourishing than elaborate banquets he had attended in his business career, not because the food was superior in any conventional sense, but because his approach to eating had been transformed from unconscious consumption to conscious communion. The practice of oryoki had revealed eating to be what it had always been, but what he had forgotten. A sacred act that connected him to the web of life that sustained all existence. Every meal was an opportunity for gratitude. Every bite a chance to practice presence. Every moment of nourishment a reminder of the interconnectedness that bound all beings together. The silence in the hall continued even as the meal concluded. 30 practitioners sat in stillness, digesting not only the food they had consumed, but the deeper nourishment that came from eating with complete awareness. In this silence, Takeshi could feel the presence of Hotei, the laughing Buddha whose greatest abundance had come from his simplest meals, whose deepest joy had emerged from his most humble practices. As the evening deepened and shadows lengthened across the dining hall, Takeshi understood that he had been fed in ways that went far beyond the physical. The practice of silent, mindful eating had nourished something in him that had been starving despite years of elaborate meals and abundant consumption. In learning to eat with reverence, he had begun to live with reverence. In practicing gratitude for his food, he had opened his heart to gratitude for existence itself. The last drops of tea finished, the final grain of rice consumed, Takeshi sat in perfect stillness, feeling the quiet satisfaction that comes not from having eaten much, but from having eaten well, with attention, with appreciation, with awareness of the miraculous gift that every meal represents. In this moment of completion, he tasted something sweeter than any dessert, more satisfying than any feast. The simple perfection of being exactly where he was, having exactly what he needed, wanting nothing more than what this moment offered. The practice of oryoki had taught him that true abundance was not about having more, but about appreciating what was already present. Like Hotei with his modest sack and his infinite laughter, Takeshi had discovered that the deepest nourishment came not from elaborate consumption, but from simple presence, the art of being fully alive to each moment, each breath, each perfectly ordinary miracle of existence. Part 9. Nocturnal Star Contemplation. The sky surrenders its last traces of sunset, transforming from deep purple to the infinite black velvet of night. Shadows dance differently in the darkness, softer, more mysterious, as if the night has awakened the garden's hidden spirit. The Zen garden appears transformed under starlight, every stone and carefully raked pattern now part of a mystical landscape that seems to breathe with ancient wisdom. Evening insects create a natural symphony. The rhythmic chirping of crickets weaves through the distant call of a night heron, while bamboo leaves rustle in the cool mountain breeze. Water continues to flow from the small stone fountain, its trickling now seeming more profound in the darkness, like liquid music composed by the earth itself. Each sound carries weight and meaning, as if the night is amplified not just volume but significance. The old samurai emerges from his modest wooden house, carrying a simple woven mat made of tatami reeds. His movements are unhurried, each step deliberate and mindful. At 65, his body moves with the careful grace of someone who has learned to honor both strength and fragility. He wears a simple dark yukata, its fabric blending seamlessly with the night, making him appear almost as a moving shadow, a part of the darkness rather than separate from it. Walking slowly around a small clearing in his garden, he feels the energy of the space with his feet, sensing where the earth calls to him. This selection process carries the same precision he once used to position himself in battle, but now the enemy is restlessness, and the victory sought is perfect harmony with the natural world. Finally, he stops near a small stone fountain, where the sound of water mingles with the night breeze, creating what the Japanese call ma, the pregnant pause between sounds that holds infinite possibility. He unfolds his mat with ceremonial care, smoothing each corner as if preparing an altar. Every gesture is performed with the mindfulness of a tea ceremony master, understanding that how we prepare for contemplation is as important as the contemplation itself. The mat becomes his vessel, his connection point between earth and sky, a small island of human intention floating in the vast ocean of night. Settling onto the mat, he sits first in size position, kneeling with his feet tucked beneath him. His weathered hands rest naturally on his thighs, fingers neither grasping nor rejecting, simply present. His breathing deepens automatically, a response trained over decades of meditation practice. The transition from movement to stillness is seamless, like a river naturally flowing into a quiet pool. The night welcomes him as it welcomed his ancestors. In darkness, he finds a light that has always been within. This understanding flows through him not as thought, but as embodied knowing. The way a tree knows to reach towards sunlight without conscious decision. After several minutes of seated meditation, he slowly transitions to lying flat on his back. This movement takes nearly a full minute, not from physical limitation, but from mindful intention. Each vertebra settles against the mat individually, his spine aligning with the earth beneath him like a human compass needle pointing toward the cosmos. His arms rest naturally at his sides, palms facing upward in a gesture of openness and receptivity. His breathing becomes even deeper, each exhale releasing the day's accumulated tensions, each inhale drawing the cool, star-blessed air. The sound of his breathing harmonizes with the night sounds around him, not separate from nature, but an integral part of its nocturnal symphony. In this position of ultimate surrender, the old warrior transforms from observer to participant in the cosmic dance. He becomes a bridge between earth and heaven, his body a small constellation lying beneath the infinite ones above. As if responding to his presence, the stars seem to grow brighter and more numerous. What began as scattered points of light transforms into a magnificent tapestry of constellations. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like a celestial river, its cloudy luminescence creating a pathway that ancient peoples believed led to the realm of the gods. His eyes move slowly across the sky, not searching but simply receiving. His gaze is soft, unfocused in a way that allows peripheral vision to expand and encompass more of the cosmic display. This is a technique learned not in meditation halls, but during night watches as a young samurai, when alertness to movement across wide visual fields could mean the difference between life and death. 50 years ago, he lay like this in the mountains of Honshu, waiting for dawn and the battle that would come with it. His sensei, Old Master Yamamoto, taught young warriors to read the stars not just for navigation, but for inner direction. The old master would say that the stars do not fight the darkness. They simply shine their light, and in doing so, transform a knight from enemy to teacher. At the time, this seemed like philosophical decoration to more practical lessons of war. Now he sees that darkness is not the absence of light, but its partner in the dance of existence. Without night, we could not see the stars. Without struggle, we could not appreciate peace. Without the long years of violence and conflict, the profound sweetness of this moment, lying peacefully under an infinite sky, would remain unknown, unappreciated. He raises his arms slowly, pointing toward different constellations with the fluid grace of someone drawing invisible calligraphy across the sky. His movements are those of a teacher, someone sharing sacred knowledge accumulated over a lifetime of observation. The Big Dipper rotates around the North Star throughout the night like a cosmic clock. Fellow samurai learn to tell time by its position, and at this hour in this season, its handle points toward the east, where dawn will eventually break. But navigation was never just about finding the way across the land. The stars taught navigation of the soul's landscape as well. When lost in anger after battles, he would look to Orion, the hunter. In winter, the constellation stands proud in the sky, reminding observers that strength and grace can coexist. There's Cassiopeia, the proud queen condemned to hang upside down in the sky for her vanity, teaching that pride comes before the fall, that even in victories, humility before the vastness of existence remains essential. And there stretches the Silver River, the Milky Way, known to his people as the Celestial River and Managua, where the most beautiful love story in all the heavens plays out eternally. This cosmic band of light holds within its luminous depths a tale that has guided hearts for countless generations. Long ago, when the world was younger and the boundary between heaven and earth was thin as morning mist, there lived a celestial weaver named Orihime. She was a daughter of Tenti, the Emperor of Heaven, and her skill at the loom was unmatched in all the realm of the gods. Day and night, Orihime worked at her cosmic loom, weaving the very fabric of the heavens. Her threads were made of starlight and moonbeams, and from them she created the aurora that dances across the northern sky, and the delicate veils of clouds that drift across the celestial sphere. But Orihime's dedication to her work consumed her entirely. She knew nothing of love, nothing of companionship. Her father, seeing her isolation, grew concerned. Even the gods need connection, need the warmth of another soul to complete their existence. Across the Celestial River, on the other side of the Silver Stream, lived Hikoboshi the cowherd. He tended to the sacred cattle of heaven, whose milk formed the clouds and whose gentle lowing created the wind that carries prayers from earth to the divine realm. Hikoboshi was known throughout heaven for his kindness and his songs. As he led the celestial cattle to graze among the star meadows, he would sing melodies so beautiful that even the planets paused in their orbits to listen. Tenti arranged for the two to meet, and when Orihime first saw Hikoboshi across the Silver River, her shuttle fell silent. When Hikoboshi heard her gentle laughter carried on the stellar wind, his songs turned to poetry. It was love that transcended the very fabric of existence. They were married in a ceremony that lit up the entire night sky, and their happiness was so radiant that it could be seen from earth. But love, even divine love, can become consuming. Orihime abandoned her loom entirely, and Hikoboshi's cattle wandered untended through the heavens. The cosmic order began to unravel. Without Orihime's celestial fabric, the sky grew thin and tears began to appear in the heavens. Without Hikoboshi's careful tending, the sacred cattle gave no milk, and the earth below suffered drought. The balance that maintains all existence threatened to collapse under the weight of neglected duty. Tenti, in his wisdom and his sorrow, realized he must act. He separated the lovers, placing them on opposite sides of the celestial river, forbidding them to meet. Orihime wept tears that became the autumn rain, and Hikoboshi's laments became the winter wind. Their separation became part of the natural order, their longing woven into the very fabric of seasonal change. But love, true love, cannot be destroyed, only transformed, moved by their devotion and their pain. Tenti decreed that once each year, on the 7th day of the 7th month, if the skies were clear, a bridge of magpies would span the celestial river, allowing the lovers to meet for a single night. And so, every summer, when the Milky Way is brightest in our sky, Orihime and Hikoboshi cross the Silver River to embrace. Their joy is so great that it causes meteors to streak across the heavens, and their brief reunion reminds all beings, mortal and divine, that some connections transcend time, distance, and even divine decree. This is why people celebrate Tanabata, the Star Festival. They write wishes on paper and hang them on bamboo, hoping that the power of eternal love will carry their deepest hopes across the vast distances of space and time. The old samurai thinks of his own beloved Michiko, who passed beyond the river of death 15 summers ago. Sometimes, lying beneath these same stars, he imagines that they too are separated by a celestial stream, and that patience, cosmic patience, will reunite them when the time comes. His words carry no sadness, only a deep acceptance and hope that transcends personal loss. The samurai code taught about duty, honor, sacrifice, but the stars teach about connection, about how love persists even when its expression must be patient, distant, transformed. The warrior path prepared him for many things, but it was the stars that taught him the deepest lessons about endurance and faith. He extends his arms slightly, as if embracing the entire cosmos. We lie here beneath the same stars that shone on the first humans, that will shine on the last. We are part of a story that began with the first light, and will continue long after our small chapter ends. In this understanding, there is no loneliness, only connection across time and space. The night deepens around him, but rather than growing darker, it seems to grow more luminous. Each star appears brighter, more present, as if the cosmos is responding to his attention with its own form of recognition. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a river of light, and he understands himself to be both observer and participant in its eternal flow. His breathing slows further, each inhalation drawing in starlight, each exhalation releasing him more completely into the vast embrace of space. The boundary between his body and the night air becomes less distinct. He is the garden, the mountain, the turning earth beneath the wheeling sky. The sounds of night continue, water flowing over stones, insects singing their ancient songs, wind moving through bamboo. But now they seem like parts of a cosmic symphony, with his gentle breathing as the underlying rhythm that connects earth to heaven. Time becomes fluid, elastic. Minutes might be hours. Hours might be eternal moments. In this state of deep communion with the infinite, practical concerns dissolve. There is no tomorrow's garden to tend, no memories of yesterday's battles to process. There is only this eternal now, this perfect present moment where a small human consciousness touches the vast intelligence that moves the stars in their courses. The old warrior communes with infinity, finding in the patient stars a mirror of his own transformed heart. Where once he sought victory in battle, now he finds triumph and surrender to the eternal dance of light and darkness, separation and reunion, love and patience. The scene holds in contemplative silence, the rhythm of breathing synchronized with the eternal pulse of the universe itself. Above, the stars continue their ancient rotation, carrying their stories of love and loss, duty and transcendence, while below, one small human being participates in the cosmic meditation that has no beginning and no end. Part 10. The Warrior's Rest. The transition from starlight contemplation to the sacred ritual of rest unfolds with the same deliberate grace that has marked every moment of this day. The old samurai rises from his mat with fluid precision, each movement a continuation of the cosmic meditation that connected him to the infinite canvas above. His body carries a profound stillness of someone who has touched eternity and now must gently return to the mortal realm of sleep and dreams. The night air has grown cooler, carrying with it the deep sense of mountain pine and the faint sweetness of night-blooming jasmine that climbs along the wooden fence surrounding his modest garden. Dew had begun to form on the carefully placed stones of his Zen arrangement, each droplet catching and holding fragments of starlight like tiny mirrors reflecting the cosmos. The sound of the stone fountain continues its eternal dialogue with the darkness, a liquid mantra that will persist through the night hours, maintaining the garden's meditative rhythm even as human consciousness surrenders to sleep. Rolling his woven mat with the same ceremonial attention he brought to its placement, he creates a perfect cylinder that speaks to decades of martial discipline transformed into peaceful routine. The simple act becomes a meditation on completion, on the proper ending of activities that allows them to retain their sacred quality. Each fold and tuck represents gratitude for the mat's service, acknowledgement of the earth that supported him, recognition of the stars that welcomed his contemplation. Walking back toward his house, his bare feet whisper against the smooth stones of the garden path. The tactile connection between soul and stone grounds him, brings his awareness back from the vast expanses of cosmic consciousness into the intimate reality of his physical form. Each step is placed with full attention, transforming the simple journey from garden to doorway into a walking meditation that bridges outer contemplation with inner preparation for rest. The wooden house welcomes him with the familiar creaks and sighs of aged timber settling into night. These sounds, which might disturb a restless mind, bring him comfort, the house breathing along with its inhabitant, sharing in the rhythm of evening's deepening peace. A single oil lamp glows softly in the main room, its flame steady and golden, casting dancing shadows that seem to celebrate rather than disturb the approaching quietude. Before tending to sleep, he turns to the alcove where his katana rests in its wooden stand. This is perhaps the most sacred moment of his evening ritual, the careful honoring of the sword that once defined his identity, but now serves a transformed purpose. The weapon that once thirsted for battle now stands as a monument to discipline, honor, and a profound peace that comes from laying down arms not in defeat, but but in victory over the need for violence. His hands approach the katana with the same reverence once reserved for approaching the Shinto shrine of his childhood. The sword's presence fills the small space with weight and history, not the burden of past battles, but the dignity of a warrior's tools transformed into instrument of contemplation. The lacquered scabbard gleams softly in the lamplight, its black surface seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it, like a portal into profound darkness from which all wisdom emerges. Lifting the katana with both hands, he holds it horizontally before him in the traditional manner of respect. The weight of the blade, perfectly balanced, forged by masters whose names have been lost to time, settles into his palms like a familiar prayer. But now the steel carries different memories, not the clash of metal against metal, not the desperate weight of life and death decisions, but the patient years of learning that true strength comes from the discipline to not draw the sword, the wisdom to find victory without battle. He raises a katana toward his forehead in a gesture of gratitude and reverence. This salute honors not the weapon's capacity for destruction, but its role as teacher of precision, focus, and a razor-edge awareness that cuts through illusion to reach truth. The sword taught him that every action must be deliberate, that careless movement in any realm, whether wielding steel or tending garden, dishonors both the actor and the action. As he returns a katana to its stand, positioning it with millimeter precision, he recalls the ancient teaching that the sword's true power lies not in its cutting, but in its presence. The way a master's reputation for skill could end conflict before they began, the way the knowledge of one's own capacity for decisive action creates the inner stillness that makes such action unnecessary. The sword properly honored and secured for night, he turns his attention to the final preparations for sleep. His futon lies rolled in the corner of the room, a simple bed that speaks to the warrior's traditional understanding that comfort comes not from luxury, but from alignment between outer simplicity and inner richness. Unrolling the bedding becomes another meditation, the careful smoothing of fabric and expression of gratitude for rest earned through a day fully lived. The futon's placement is not arbitrary, but follows principles learned in decades of military campaigns, where the ability to sleep safely and wake instantly could mean survival. Positioned so that he can see both the room's entrance and the window overlooking his garden, the bed allows for rest without abandoning the warrior's instinct for awareness. But now this positioning serves contemplative rather than defensive purposes, maintaining connection with the natural world even in sleep, keeping the boundary between inner and outer space fluid and permeable. Changing from his day clothes into a simple sleeping yukata, he performs each movement with the mindfulness of a tea ceremony. The removal of the day's garments becomes a symbolic shedding of the day's experiences, creating space for the night's different kind of consciousness. The soft cotton of the sleeping robe whispers against the skin like a benediction, blessing the transition from active engagement with the world to passive receptivity to whatever wisdom dreams might bring. Seated on the edge of his futon, he begins the evening's final meditation, a practice of gratitude that transforms the day's experiences into spiritual nourishment. This is not the quick thanks of social courtesy, but a deep inventory of blessing that turns memory into medicine, experience into wisdom. He gives thanks for morning's awakening, for consciousness returning to inhabit this aging but still serviceable body. Gratitude flows for the simple miracle of breath moving in and out without effort or thought, for the heart that has beaten steadily through decades of peace and conflict, now maintaining its rhythm in profound quietude. Thanks rise for the garden that provided both work and meditation, for soil that accepted seeds and water, for plants that grew according to their nature while teaching him about patience and proper timing. Appreciation fills him for the stone fountain that sang its liquid song throughout the day, for water that flows according to gravity's pull while demonstrating the power of persistence and gentle movement. He offers gratitude for tea that warmed his hands and cleared his mind, for the simple food that nourished his body without complaint or demand. Thanks emerged a calligraphy brush that translated inner states into visible form, for ink that flowed like concentrated night across paper white as morning snow. Appreciation wells up for the evening stars that receive his contemplation, and return it transformed into cosmic perspective. Gratitude flows for the legends and stories that connect him to countless generations of seekers, for the invisible threads that bind all humans searching into one great tapestry of meaning-making. Most profoundly, he gives thanks for the peace that now surrounds and fills him, Peace earned not through avoidance of conflict, but through moving so completely through struggle that he emerged on a far side of the need for external battle. This peace is not emptiness, but fullness, not the absence of engagement, but its deepest form. As gratitude completes its circuit through memory and awareness, he prepares to lie down for sleep. But first, the story that has guided warriors for over a millennium must be honored. The tale of Yamato Takeru, whose life illuminates a path from external conquest to inner victory. In the ancient days when Japan was young and wild, when the boundaries between human and divine realms remained fluid and permeable, there lived a prince whose strength surpassed all mortal men. Yamato Takeru was his name, and he was destined to become the greatest warrior in the land's history. But his story teaches that the mightiest victory is won not through sword and strategy, but through the conquest of one's own heart. Born Emperor Keiko, Yamato Takeru displayed supernatural strength from childhood. By the age of 16, he could bend iron bars with his bare hands and defeat seasoned warriors in single combat. His father, recognizing both the prince's gifts and the dangerous pride that accompanied them, sent him on a series of missions to pacify the rebellious tribes that threatened the emerging empire. Armed with the sacred sword Kusanagi, one of the 3 imperial treasures, Yamato Takeru embarked on campaigns that would make him legend. In the eastern provinces, he defeated the Emishur warriors who had resisted imperial rule for generations. In the western lands, he subdued the Kumaso rebels who had declared independence from central authority. Victory followed victory, each triumph adding layers to his reputation and his own sense of invincibility. But with each conquest, something within the prince began to harden. The joy of victory became an addiction, the praise of his subject a drug that required ever stronger doses. He began to see enemies where none existed, to interpret disagreement as rebellion, to confuse fear with respect. The sacred sword that was meant to protect the people became an instrument of his will rather than divine justice. The transformation became complete during the campaign against the eastern barbarians. Surrounded by enemies in a burning grassland, Yamato Takeru used Kusanagi to cut down the grass and create a firebreak that saved his life. But instead of gratitude for divine intervention, he felt only pride in his own cleverness. He began to believe that his strength came from himself alone, that the gods were merely extensions of his own power. It was then that the true test began. The kami, the spirits of the land, recognized the dangerous path the prince was walking. They sent him dreams of an old woman who appeared at crossroads, always pointing toward a more difficult path, always suggesting that true strength lay in directions he had not yet explored. But Yamato Takeru, drunk on his own success, ignored these visions as the fantasies of a warrior's tired mind. The crisis came during what should have been his final campaign. The prince approached a great mountain where the last rebel stronghold was said to lie hidden. But as he climbed the treacherous paths, his weapons began to feel impossibly heavy. His famous strength deserted him step by step. By the time he reached the summit, he could barely lift Kusanagi, and the rebel fortress he sought was nowhere to be found. Instead, he found only an ancient shrine tended by a woman, so older age seemed to span centuries. She sat in perfect stillness, her eyes reflecting depths that made the mountain valley seem shallow. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of stone and water, of forces that shape landscapes over geological time. "Great prince," she said, "you have conquered every enemy but one. You have defeated every foe except the one that matters most. Your strength has carried you to the highest peak in the land, but can it carry you down again?" Yamato Takeru, exhausted and confused, demanded to know what enemy remained unconquered. He had subdued every rebellious tribe, defeated every warrior who dared challenge imperial authority, brought peace to every corner of the realm. What foe could possibly remain? The old woman smiled with infinite compassion. The enemy that lives in your own heart, young warrior. The foe that whispers that strength comes from defeating others rather than mastering yourself. The opponent that convinced you that your sword makes you superior to those it has never touched. In that moment, sitting at the shrine on the mountaintop, Yamato Takeru understood the true nature of his greatest battle. Every external conquest had been preparation for this internal campaign. Every victory over others had been training for the only victory that truly mattered. Victory over the illusion that he was separate from those he had defeated, superior to those he had conquered. The prince laid down Kusanagi and knelt before the ancient woman. For the first time since childhood, he felt not the pride of the victor, but the humility of the student. The sword that had made him legend suddenly seemed like a child's toy compared to the vast work of inner transformation that lay before him. "Teach me," he whispered, and in those words lay the seed of his true greatness. The old woman's teaching was simple but profound. She showed him that every battle he had won through strength could have been won through wisdom. Every enemy he had defeated through force could have been transformed into an ally through understanding. Every conquest achieved through violence could have been accomplished through the deeper power of compassion. The greatest warriors, she explained, are those who never need to draw their swords. The mightiest victory is the battle that ends before it begins, resolved through victors' refusal to see opponents as enemies and instead recognizing them as teachers in disguise. Under her guidance, Yamato Takeru began the most difficult campaign of his life. The conquest of his own ego, the defeat of his own need to defeat others. He learned that true strength comes not from the ability to impose one's will, but from the wisdom to align one's will with the natural harmony that underlies all existence. Years passed in this mountain training. The prince who had once moved like a storm across the landscape now sat in perfect stillness, learning the deeper currents that move beneath surface conflicts. He studied the way water shapes stone not through violence, but through patient persistence, the way sunlight transforms the hardest earth not through force, but through gentle, constant presence. When he finally descended from the mountain, Yamato Takeru carried Kusanagi not as a weapon, but as a symbol of discriminating wisdom, the ability to cut through illusion and see the truth that connects all beings. The rebels who had once opposed and became his advisors, former enemies transformed into allies through his newfound ability to see their grievances as expressions of legitimate needs rather than threats to be crushed. The prince who had conquered a nation through warfare became the emperor, who united it through understanding. His reign was marked not by the battles he won, but by the battles he prevented, not by the enemies he defeated, but by the friends he made from former opponents. And when Yamato Takeru's time came to leave the earthly realm, he died not in glorious battle, but in perfect peace, surrounded by those who had once been his enemies and had become his greatest teachers. His final words were said to be, "The warrior's greatest victory is the moment when warfare becomes unnecessary." This is a teaching that guides evening meditation. That true conquest lies not in defeating others, but in conquering the need to defeat others. That genuine strength manifests as a power to remain peaceful in the face of provocation. That the ultimate weapon is the wisdom that transforms opponents into teachers and conflicts into opportunities for deeper understanding. Lying down on his simple futon, the old samurai embodies this teaching. His own katana rests peacefully in its stand, no longer an instrument of division, but a reminder of unity. The unity between strength and gentleness, between vigilance and rest, between the warrior's readiness and the sage's peace. His head settles into the buckwheat hull pillow with a soft whisper of shifting grain. The pillow, like everything else in his modest home, serves multiple purposes. Comfort for rest, but also a reminder of simplicity, of the way the humblest materials can provide the deepest contentment when approached with proper gratitude and attention. The day's activities settle into memory, like sediment falling through clear water. Each experience, morning tea, garden work, calligraphy practice, evening contemplation, becomes part of the rich deposit of lived wisdom that will nourish tomorrow's activities. Nothing is wasted, nothing is lost. Every moment of attention becomes part of the accumulating treasure of awareness that wealth cannot buy and loss cannot diminish. His breathing deepens and slows, harmonizing with the night sounds that surround his house like a natural lullaby. The fountain's liquid music continues its eternal conversation with gravity and stone. Night insects maintain their rhythmic chorus, a symphony of small lives celebrating the darkness that allows them to sing. Wind moves through bamboo with a whispered wisdom of flexibility, the quiet teaching of how to bend without breaking. From his futon, he can see through the window into his garden, where starlight continues to bless the carefully arranged stones and the plants that grow according to their nature. The sight fills him with profound contentment, not the satisfaction of possession, but the joy of participation in something infinitely larger than his individual existence. Sleep approaches not as unconsciousness, but as a different form of awareness, a descent into the deeper currents of consciousness where day-mind's activities can be integrated and transformed. The boundary between waking and sleeping becomes soft and permeable, like the boundary between self and world, between individual and cosmos. His final conscious thought is a wordless prayer of gratitude for the day completed, for the night's embrace, for the continuous gift of existence that asks nothing in return but attention, appreciation, and the gentle stewardship of whatever time and energy have been granted to this temporary arrangement of consciousness and flesh. The old warrior sleeps, his breathing a quiet counterpoint to the night's eternal symphony, his rest a final meditation of a day fully lived, completely received, gracefully released into the vast embrace of darkness that holds all things with equal tenderness.